Still, and now we are recording. That's become a staple of the channel, so don't think anything too weird about it. People get upset if I don't clap nowadays. Um, but let's go back to what we were talking about. But first, let's present you. Now, I am a known butcherer of names. Is it Matthew Mastronardi?
Yeah, right there, Mastronardi.
There we go. There we go. Okay, I'm getting better at it. Matthew, you're one of the many teachers, surprisingly, it's becoming more and more many teachers who's been right now. I know you're in the process. June 25th, you have something coming up, whether or not you're going to get reinstated, but just for the purpose of this conversation, you were let go from your teaching career because you decided to read a book.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here.
Of course.
And yeah, so I'm a public high school teacher. I teach Spanish. I'm going to be very upfront about that. But a spontaneous, candid conversation arose in my classroom around the book To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm.
I overheard two students speaking about the book that they are currently assigned to read in their English class and how they have to skip over the N word. And I overheard that and I just said, really? You have to do that? I mean, you're assigned to read the book. It seems like it undermines the historical context and you really miss an opportunity to have a conversation about this because the author used historically accurate language to depict a time in history. And you really distance yourself from what she wanted you to feel when you skip over words. And that's not even to mention the slippery slope that you go down when you start getting rid of words and then you start getting rid of entire ideas and then entire stories. And then all you have left is students that read every approved word, but they have no understanding of how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think there's something more at stake here than just one word and one passage from a book. It's about a teacher's ability to tell the truth in the classroom. And so that's what it is, and I was secretly recorded after I read this passage, but it was a teachable moment that I was responding to genuine student curiosity. And as an educator, I was just trying to give meaning to my students and help them think for themselves.
Well, I think therein lies the problem. You're a teacher trying to teach people to think for themselves. That seems to be a theme of why teachers are getting fired recently. It's very odd because, on the other side of things, you're not seeing many teachers get fired for, various flags that they're putting up in their class, ideology that they might be pushing. But then all of a sudden, someone like you does something very simple as to just make sure somebody reads something properly, reads it to what it's supposed to be read, so they really understand. And the next thing you know, you're gone.
Yeah. So I'm in the state of Washington, which, for better or for worse, a lot of people will, say we're a very progressive state, even though I live in an area that is pretty middle of the road, to be honest, over here in Eastern Washington. But nonetheless, I see videos on libs of TikTok all the time, and a lot of teachers from my state. I just saw one that popped up recently. It was a kindergarten teacher doing a Pride Day lesson for her kindergartners, and there was rainbow flags. They were talking about transgender things and how do you feel? And it's like, okay, this is another teacher in my state who is filming herself as she's doing this and publicly uploading it, and there's no blowback whatsoever. But I read verbatim from a school-approved text, which is an American classic.
Yep.
And I'm on the chopping block.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very interesting to see how that is, and I think that kind of shows that I think maybe at one point your area was the middle of the road, but I think they're starting to choose a side. It seems. Just saying.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many consequences that are downstream from not being able to speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at the point where I'm not really afraid to be vocal about this anymore. But we had a girl who lost to a biological boy at the state track and field championships.
Oh, wow.
And she lost to this boy who's competing as a girl
Mhm.
2 years in a row. She took second at state 2 years in a row. And the adults in charge do and said nothing.
Huh.
And
This
I
happened recently?
happened recently, happened this year, just like literally less than a month ago.
Wow.
Yeah, Riley Gaines was talking about it on her X page a little bit, and it's just upsetting because the truth is really what's at stake here.
Mhm.
It's not about a word like I was saying earlier. It's about, is the classroom meant to be a place where we can tell the truth?
Mhm.
And when I do something that's not in conformity with the secular progressivism ideology, you get punished for it. And so that's really what this is about.
So picking up from where we were telling the story, you were secretly recorded. So then what happened? Was it the next day? Were you pulled into an office? Like, how did this all
Yeah,
happen?
that's a good question. So the next day, this is actually kind of funny. So this happened on a Thursday. The
Mhm.
next day was Friday, and I actually had a pre-planned day off because I was gonna celebrate my 5-year wedding anniversary with my wife. And
Oh.
so I come back on Monday, and all the kids were like, "Oh my gosh, he's back. We thought you got fired." And I just laughed. I was like, "No, I'm not gonna get fired. That would be crazy if I got fired over this."
Yeah.
Lo and behold. But it wasn't. It was a few days went by, and the principal came to my room and just sat down with me, and he wanted to know what happened from my side of the story. But then he was really upset. He goes, "Look, I think you made a horrible decision, and this could get really bad.
Wow.
And I don't think you, as a white male, should have done what you did." And I said, "Okay, my conscience is clean." But so after that, I received a verbal reprimand and an
Okay.
official, like, verbal warning. And then 2 days later after that, I thought it was over, but the human resources director sent me an email saying they'd like to discuss my contract. And that's sort of when I knew where this was heading. And so
Wow.
I was given the ultimatum, look, in light of recent events, you can either voluntarily resign or we're not going to renew your contract. And so I've been going
Hmm.
back and forth with the superintendent, and he's recommending me for non-renewal to the school board. And on Wednesday, that's on the agenda for them to discuss. And I plan on making a public statement, and hopefully they'll reconsider. But that's where we're at. Something that's interesting is my brother. Maybe you got this or not. I don't know. He actually was a fellow colleague of mine. He worked across the hall.
Oh.
He was a fellow Spanish teacher. So my brother worked across the hall from me, and he actually resigned his position in solidarity with me.
Wow.
So we're both trying to get reinstated. We hope the district will change their minds, but we have to. Yeah, this is about free speech too. So we have to stand up for what's right, and we're going to keep fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good brother you got there. I mean,
It was very
yeah,
brave.
that's
He'd been teaching there for 8 years. Longer.
wow. Wow, man. That sucks that you have to do that, man. I always think of things like this because, for the longest time before I jumped into this so-called career, I always had issues keeping work. And I know what happens when you don't have work for a while. Everybody knows what happens, what could happen, how bad it could get. So when somebody gets done away with over trivial things, it always seems so heartless. I've talked about it before on my show, and I always talk about inclusivity to the point of destruction. There's like a diminishing return on it after a certain amount of time, where like now you're getting to a point where someone reads a book and they're getting fired, and that's because yeah, maybe like I don't know the whole situation. Maybe there was no black kids in the class, but it's like there's a black person who could hear about this and be upset on the other side of the school. So now they're trying to make sure that they're not upsetting anybody, and in not upsetting anybody, they're going to take this guy's livelihood away, just like that. It's just, it's wild to see happening more and more like this.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, okay, maybe you can disagree with my going off script a little bit as an educator.
Hmm.
But ask yourself, is this worthy of being a fireable offense?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really what people need to ask. They can say, okay, maybe he shouldn't have done it. Maybe he should just stick to Spanish and just never try to cultivate any meaningful relationship with his students. And he should just, all right. But is it worth firing somebody? And you're right. Like there is people in the community. There are people in the community who, like the local NAACP chapter. They've been vocal against me, and I just love how they think that they represent all Black people.
Of course. I mean, that's the role that they try to take, right? I mean, as much authority as possible, right?
And it kind of I just don't think anybody on the basis of their skin color has authority to speak whether something is true or not. Right? It should be about the idea of it itself. Because as soon as we start saying, well, on the basis of your skin color, you have the right or don't have the right to say certain things. And doesn't that just defeat the whole
That
purpose of
that's the step backwards. That's going
yeah.
backwards, you know?
Martin Luther King said it's the content of our character, not the color of our skin. And it doesn't make what I say any less true or more true just because I have less or more melanin in my skin.
Yeah.
And that's just that's why this is bigger than just reading To Kill a Mockingbird, because we're seeing a lot of issues come to the forefront. And that's one of them. It's like you can't protect kids by banning certain words. You protect them by teaching them how to understand them and to wrestle with them in real time.
Yes, yes. That's one thing that I saw in a conversation you were having where you wanted them to understand the ugliness of the
Mhm.
word, is how you put it. And I thought, I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, you don't teach them to just push it aside. Like, you teach that it used to be there and that it was very ugly, and to the point where an author would be like, yeah, no problem, just put this down. And like, that's a
Yeah,
valuable lesson to have for kids,
it is. And
especially high school. It's not like we're talking about you're like in front of a bunch of 4-year-olds here. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, these are kids who are 15, 16, 17 years old, and man, they need to grow up.
Yeah.
We need these kids in just a few years to be citizens. We need them to be functioning members of a society, and a person who is no longer a child but is in the workforce, engaging in the functions of a normal citizen. We need those people to be able to differentiate between reading a book and somebody using that word in a discriminatory manner. You can't just lump them all in the same thing. Like it there's there needs to be room for moral nuance. And we can't
Yes.
just like have, you know, that the usage of the word in different contexts, it's different. And you can't
Yes.
just have people collapsing emotionally when you hear somebody read from a book. It's gonna set us back so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that, especially when you just hear it in a book. I mean, that's, it's in the book. So, you have to actually say it out loud. And I guess it goes with something else I heard you touch on, which was the context of words.
Mhm.
Right. And there is a context there, like you're reading. But you know what? It actually harkens back to a Netflix executive that got fired for the same thing. He said the word and he was quoting somebody. Like, this person said this, and we can't have that. That's what side of things he was on. And they're like, well, we heard you say it, so
Done.
you're gone. That was it.
Yeah, I mean,
Fired.
it's just weird how people are willing to just be so they're picking and choosing when it's okay, right? Like
Mhm.
I just, if I what it was how long ago was it? Yeah, a few months ago I watched the Jackie Robinson movie. And in that movie there's a scene of one of the coaches on an opposing team who's just dehumanizing Jackie Robinson, just repeating it over and over and over again, right?
Mhm.
And I don't hear people freaking out over that. And rightly so, because you're trying to depict what life was actually like and what this man actually suffered through. It would actually undermine his experience if you just said inward, inward, inward,
Yeah,
right? It doesn't have the same effect. So
exactly.
why is it okay if somebody's filming a movie, right? Like that person gets a pass, but when somebody's trying to just respect the author's intent with a book, you get, sent to, this you're the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah. And that's kind of what it is in your position, right? They have to. That's why I say, they're kind of choosing a side right now. Like you're saying how they're middle of the road, but they're kind of putting you up on the chopping block is like, this is our sacrifice to this
Yeah.
whole agenda. We are willing to make sacrifices like this.
Yeah. And when you
So,
say the word sacrifice, I mean, that's a religious word,
yeah.
right? And so people think that blasphemy laws are ancient relics from the past, but they're still around and we've just secularized them. And so you can think of it as like I committed a modern day, I violated a blasphemy law that the secular progressive overlords of our society think I offended them. And that's exactly what this is. To
Yeah.
say that a word is unutterable, no matter what the context is, I don't think it's that far of a stretch to say that that is religious superstition.
Yeah.
You obviously, I'll say it again. I don't want to hear anybody say that word in a discriminatory, pejorative way. And I understand the word has a sharpness to it. It really does.
Yeah.
And words are like tools. And maybe that one should just be left away for, for most of the time. But like when you're reading a book or you're reading a historical quote or filming a movie, it's like you can conceive of a context where it might actually be necessary in order to get the message across.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, if you're recording an album as well,
Oh, sure, yeah.
there's a pass there.
Yeah. Just become a rapper and you can say it
That
whenever you want.
that's what you should have said. You should have said that you're a rapper. You're a part-time
Yeah.
rapper, and then
Let
they
you
would have
go
been
into
like, "Oh, okay, all right."
yeah. I mean, can I ask you a question?
What's that?
Like, just you're black, obviously. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
do, are you offended just from what I did?
No, no, no. I found it because I found you through your conversation with I hope I'm saying his name correctly, Winston Marshall.
Okay.
You're having a conversation with him, and he was another teacher who had been, let go because he was trying to help kids think independently. And right away I was like, wow, my thought process was, first off, if I just hear the word, if it's not being pointed at me or my kid, I'm good. I'm I guess I'm not that type of black. I don't know how to frame it. Like I don't get that way just over words. There's some people who are black who get violent if they just hear the word, and it's very odd. And I don't let myself get taken over that way. So I wasn't offended. I found it interesting that we're at a point where Jordan Peterson did this almost 10 years ago, and he was standing up to laws. And you would think that he would have set a precedent that this type of thing would stop, but it's like gotten worse and worse and worse and more more like micromanaged
Hmm.
to the point now where you've just said a word. He was standing up against a whole ideology and laws and a system, and there was this whole big thing. And then the next thing you know, recently, I think it was last year, there was a teacher in Ireland. He got let go because pretty much the same type of thing. He did not want to teach kids certain ideology, and they let him go. And they even took money away from his bank account. They like froze
Wow.
his bank account and took his money. It was like $50,000 or $40,000 that they took away from this man. And now I'm hearing it. Then I hear Winston's Winston's whole thing where he was just sitting with a kid, just being like, well, what do you think about this? And just helping them think better, more independently. And he gets fired. And now it's like to the point where you've just said a word. And I just find it so interesting that it's getting more like microscoped in as time goes on, and so quickly as well.
Yeah. I mean,
so no, I mean, that was a long answer, but
yeah.
no, I'm not offended by that. Me and my wife, like right away, my wife's white, and we were like, I was like, what's the problem with that book? And she's like, I don't know. Like, we had to search it and be like, oh, it's the N word. We're like, okay, all right.
I like, if for people who have read the book, it's an amazing book, but it actually it encourages people not to be racists. It looks at the injustice of racism through the lens of a young girl, and it's kind of her journey as she's watching this story unfold. And in like using the historically accurate language, it really just helps you immerse yourself into the story, and like it makes it pack a punch, because you confront how ugly it is head on. And that's what's really ironic about all this, is like I was telling people not to use that word in a discriminatory way.
Yeah, that's the way that this ideology kind of rears its head. I was talking with somebody, great guy. I'm pretty conservative. He's on the other side of the aisle. He's pretty left wing, and I still have civil conversations. We debated a little bit, but I noticed him. The way I found him was he was in a video, and this guy's left wing. He's at an anti Elon Musk rally, and he was just asking questions, just saying, what are you doing here today? And right away, they took the position of, this guy's some kind of conservative. They started yelling at him. They started trying to kind of run a chant around him so he couldn't speak, signs in his face and everything. And I found it so crazy, because I'm like, wow, this guy's on their side and they're doing this to him. It was so interesting. Right away, I had to talk to him about it. And yeah, it seems like, again, there's a saying we have on the right, which is, the left eats their own, and they do quite a bit.
Yeah.
Even if you're on that side,
they don't have any true loyalties.
Yes.
Like, so the only way for them to kind of continue making progress is to like just keep advancing. So one example is like Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of Planned Parenthood, right?
Yes. A lot of people don't know about
she was a big proponent of eugenics.
Yep.
But even she was against actual abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice how Planned Parenthood used to celebrate Margaret Sanger, but now they're actually a lot more quiet about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They don't celebrate her as much, because even she was against it. But now they're, like you said, they eat their own.
It's exactly going back to what you just said about the whole religious factor, right? The only thing that matters is not the nuance between individuals, but where the movement itself is going, and who is standing with it as it moves further and further left, or further and further, whichever way it goes. I just did an episode about that. Joe Rogan was talking with Oliver Anthony. He's a country singer. He did that song Richmond of Richmond.
I love that song, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great song. He's a great guy too. And he was talking about how, whether it's the left or the right, it's like he was using the analogy from Maps of Meaning in terms of zebras. Like, the second that a zebra changes their stripes just a little bit, like they are now standing out from the rest of the pack, and they are now prey, like right away, because now the lion can see them. They stand out more than anything else.
Oh.
And that's really what it seems like. As soon as on their side of things, as soon as you step out of line, it just, you get taken out, like right away. And then one of the examples that he had was, he was just talking about Hillary Clinton, and how Hillary Clinton used to, Joe Rogan put it like, she used to be more MAGA than MAGA. Like, she was talking about illegal immigration, and she's like, these people need to learn English, and they should get a fine, and you gotta wait in line properly. And she was saying all the things that you would hear Trump say while he was campaigning. And this is Hillary Clinton back in the 90s. So
I've never heard Trump say you need to learn English. So
no,
he's actually going beyond what he even says today.
Yes, exactly. But it's just interesting how, like, what we're talking about, how you have to move with the movement, and she
Mhm.
just hung on, and she's just moving with the movement to the point now she's like, there needs to be a re-education for people who vote for Trump. Like, we need to have some re-education in this country. And it's like, what did
Yeah,
you just
that's
say?
why I think, I hesitate to just throw this, liberals, conservatives. I'll say people who just have they're well rooted, right? They have an understanding of the past. And when I think we're kind of seeing that right now. Like, you're seeing people, or there's this general sensation that people are sort of trying to go back to some like the timeless wisdom. I see this renewed fascination with raising families, trad wives, um,
Mhm.
just people are flooding to a lot of like Orthodox churches right
Yeah.
now. They're filling up because people want to have some sort of continuity with the past.
Yes.
And I think there's a real good balance between being rooted in the memory of the past and like having a healthy imagination. Right? Like, I was talking with this about somebody recently. Um, People on the left are just hyper focused on imagination, and
Mhm.
they have no memory. And so they
Yeah.
betray all of those things that have allowed them to be where they are today. And sometimes people on the right are too focused on memory and going back without
Mhm.
really imagining. So you have to sort of reconcile both of those, because true innovation, true progress is always born out of like great tradition. And that's sort of where I try to live, is right in that balance of like honoring the past, honoring my fathers and our history and what made us great, while like obviously technology changes, we have to adapt, and but we can't like untether ourselves from memory. We have to
Yeah.
stay rooted in that. And I mean, going back to our conversation, is like, that's what I was trying to do when I read that book.
Mm.
If you untether yourself from history, like, you are doomed to make the same mistakes of the past.
Yes. Yes. There was just someone, I believe he is, I want to say, I think he's a congressman. His name is Wesley Hunt, I believe his name is. He's in Texas. He's a congressman, and he was talking about that exact same thing. He's a black person, and he was talking this exact, I hope I can find it, but he was talking about how, if we just relinquish the past, he's like, we're destined to repeat it. It's
Yeah,
exactly what he was talking about. He was talking about it in terms of using certain words and et cetera, et cetera. I hope I can find that actual quote
yeah.
that he had there. That
There's a
would,
good quote from the book 1984, which goes like this. It says, "Whoever controls the past controls the future.
mm,
Whoever controls the present controls the past." And
ah,
you can see that happening right now. It's like there's more arguments about what happened 100 years ago today than we're arguing about where to go in the future. Because I think that there's people understand that like how we view the past changes like our trajectory on where we're going.
yeah, true. Very, very true. I don't know if I found it or not. Let me see here. That's not it, but he has so many quotes. Oh man, I
Yeah.
wish I could find it. But yeah, he's basically just echoing exactly what you're saying. But yeah, that's an interesting quote from 1984, and that's kind of where this goes. Your situation, you can't say the word, and now the word has to be done. I don't know if you've ever read the book completely, but the word has to get done away with, and then there's somebody in charge of like bringing up the new
Yeah, the
words, and like,
new speak, right?
yes, yes, exactly.
Mhm.
So now somebody's in charge of that, and it's happened. Now it is the N word.
Yeah.
It is the N word now. Like,
Yeah, I would
even
say
I am
that.
saying the N word, and I don't have to. I could let it
No, yeah,
fly. That's one of my gifts, right? As a black person, I could just let it fly. But even I have to now control myself.
well, and like, it's not to say that like there's certain decorum and standards that should be maintained in a professional setting, right? Like I just did a news conference and one of the reporters was a black woman, but even she doesn't say it, right?
Yes.
But maybe when she's with her friends at home or something, maybe she does. But like even those standards are still applied to everybody. Like in, I think when you're on TV or you're having a civil dialogue with somebody, it's like
Yeah.
I don't drop F bombs regularly either. And so that's sort of I try to speak cleanly generally.
Yeah.
Um, and so but yeah, the N word is sort of like top of the pyramid, and but now you have other words like CUNT or even like is sort of becoming one of those words.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they're not quite as bad, but or as egregious, but they're up there, you know.
Yeah, I saw a debate between, I want to say Andrew Wilson, I believe his name is,
Mhm.
and some young kid. I forget what his name is, but he was very left wing, and they were talking about the R word, and he was like, "Do you think it's funny in any sense to use the R word?" He's like a Gen Xer. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Of course." He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, comedically, he's like, "Of course." He's like, "It's so good." And as he's saying yes, the kid literally goes like this. He's like so shocked that he covers his mouth, like a real
Wow.
reaction of like covering his mouth, and can't believe that someone's actually saying that it's funny in some regard.
That's
And
that emotional collapse that I was referring to just a little bit.
yes,
Like
yes,
are having like you're having like a bodily visceral reaction, and it's not even that like your brain is literally not controlling you anymore.
yeah,
You are going into some sort of tribal um like it's almost like you're an animal, right?
yeah,
Like if you can't control your your own rational faculties, if you were just going into this hysteria because you heard a word, that is more akin to things we see in the animal kingdom. Not
yeah,
they're not traits that a human, like a rational human being, exemplifies.
yeah. The lizard mind, the monkey mind takes over at that point,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was very interesting. He's like, "What would I say instead?" And he's like, "You say R slur." And he's like, they're like just generations apart. He's like, "R slur." He's like, "What the?" He's like, "What are you talking about?"
I heard a really funny bit. I don't know who the comedian is, but I was like I had to show it to my wife, and she has a pretty like um sensitive like sense of humor, like very like she doesn't find all the same things that I find funny,
Of
but
course.
even she laughed at this one. And it was this Asian guy. He was talking about how today Gen Z, they are all fascinated with LGBT and they're fascinated with using terms like neurodivergent.
Yes.
And he goes, because back in my day, like we didn't celebrate those things. You just tried really hard not to be a gay.
Yeah, I saw that too. I forget who that was. I know that
But his
comedian
his
too.
delivery was hilarious. But the thing is, like in comedy, like they're sort of like the gatekeepers of freedom, I guess, freedom of speech, I guess you could say. It's like
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that. I'll laugh about it because I think it's funny, but um, like it's just sort of telling, I guess, of how the time
Yeah.
has changed.
Yeah, I do stand up as well, and when I'm up there I use all the words at my disposal. I have them all, and I use all of them constantly. Uh I guess in the comedy world you say I have like blue material. That's when it's like really dirty. It's like
Okay.
really blue material.
Yeah.
But when I'm on here, not so much. But again, yeah, this is a concept I've talked about before. I think we've talked about it as we've heard it talked about years ago as golden handcuffs. I liken it now to like an invisible shock collar.
Hmm.
You're not told to not use these words on here on this platform, but there will be signs that you will have some kind of reprimanding happen if you do. So it's like this invisible shock collar.
Yeah.
Or, you
Well,
know,
YouTube would for sure probably maybe harm your algorithm or
yes,
censor the video or
yes,
flag it for being
yes,
offensive. Like I did an interview one time with a guy who wrote a book called Nazi Ecology,
Mm.
and it's a book of basically about looking at the Holocaust through an environmental lens, that like the Nazis were very green minded, and that the the Jews in concentration camps were sort of like a human sacrifice essentially to appease nature. And
Uh,
I just
that
used the word Nazi, not in any sort of, it wasn't celebrating, it was just describing what this book is about, and which the author like condemns Nazism.
of course.
But my video got flagged just because I used the word in a description.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's in the description, the titles, everything. That's the whole reason I have an editor. The
Yeah.
reason I have an editor is for that exact purpose. Otherwise, I just like, throw things
Mhm.
up and that'd be it. But I actually have to pay somebody to
Mhm.
root through that whole thing for me. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up because, you know, uh not that these people are Nazis, but it is like when Jordan Peterson talks about the climate movement, he does talk about it, that he does talk about those people in the same regard, where they have this thing almost religious again, where the poor people of today can be done away with because it will protect poor people 100 years from now, and this is very much a good thing. And it's funny you just say green minded, that's what came to mind right away. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what some people have in mind today when it comes to the whole green movement. So
Yeah,
yeah, just
there's no area of your life that is so sacred that they are not willing to infringe upon it.
yes, yes, that is a very good way of putting it. Yes,
They'll tell you
very much so.
they'll tell you how many kids you're allowed to have. They'll tell you what you're allowed to eat, what you're allowed to do inside your own home, and they'll tell you if you can raise this many animals, or how much you can spend at the grocery store, how far you can drive,
Yep.
where you can go on vacation. Meanwhile, how many jets do you see at Davos
Yeah.
every year?
Yeah.
It's like these are the biggest hypocrites in the entire world.
Yeah, it's wild. I've covered that at length. Some companies that are on the rise right now, or an industry, I should say, is people who sell carbon credits. Like right now, there's a whole thing of
Mhm,
carbon credits, and it'll dictate how much you can do in terms of everything you just mentioned. Give
mhm.
you an extension of sorts in travel and grocery, food, meat, everything, because they can link everything just to carbon. It's a wild thing to see, and it's in the tinfoil realm when you talk about this in regular society, but it is something that they are doing. I mean, I've covered it with like New York, Eric Adams. He was like, we just need more people to just not eat meat. He's like, I'm a vegan. He's like, it's good for me. I feel great. And he's like trying to convince New Yorkers. It's like, you don't need the gas stove and you don't need to be eating so much meat. And we really got to start looking into this. And we also need robot police officers. And we also need this. And it was just, I remember covering this whole thing with Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City. And I was like, within a 6 month span, he's had so many terrible authoritarian like ideas.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden it's just like the whole thing with the illegal immigration comes in, and he's like, and I'm going to take $53 million of your tax money for some pilots, and I'm going to take even more money to fund these shelters and do this and do that. And it's like, I'm like, this guy just has no good ideas at all, like none.
yeah,
And it's like the things that, again, he's willing to, his ideas are coming straight into your house, straight into like your stove, straight into your fridge,
yeah,
and it's all under the guise of protecting. It's for your own good. It's always that thing. It's for
yeah.
your own good, and it's wild to see. And then you bring up Davos. There was somebody. My brother just sent me a link. Somebody at Davos. They're like, there's a tick that makes it so if you're bit by this tick, you'll have an allergy to meat. And he's like trying to concept this idea that if we had more of these ticks, then possibly we could help people, wean themselves off of meat, because this is something that really needs to happen. And of course, it's all linked to the carbon and everything. And I was like, wow, these people. And then that guy for sure Davos, what are they serving? They're probably serving us some great steaks, some great chicken, some great this, some great that, and he's just eating it up. And he's just like, well, this is for the outside, the deplorables. That's who this idea is for. It's not for us or anything. It's wild to see. You know, you see
Yeah.
someone like Taylor Swift. You're talking about jets. Taylor Swift. Somebody showed her jet path. There's a guy who actually like follows people's jets. Elon Musk, Taylor Swift, and she was like taking like 3-minute jet rides. 3-minute here and 3-minute there, and like they're the same type of celebrities that'll tell you, you know, you gotta shape up. Like what I notice is it's always our fault. It's
Mm-hmm.
never the people who are doing the most in terms of using all of these like jets and things like that. It's never them. It's always us. That's the issue. And we need to pull back what we do. It's a wild thing. I'm sorry to go on a
No.
tangent there, but you brought up something that I've covered quite a bit, and it's just like, oh man.
Well, I think it's something that most people resonate with. They see all this hypocrisy, and I think we just have to get past the point by thinking that most of these leaders possess some sort of higher knowledge that got them there in the first place.
Yeah,
I think we're seeing that is just not the case. These are people who are oftentimes very incompetent and evil,
yeah,
but they're human beings. They're not infallible. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
yeah.
But they've become sort of untethered to everyday reality, and I imagine it has to go to your head. And so there's a lot of pride as well in the position and status that they hold, and thinking that they're somehow above the rules that they're trying to impose upon people.
Well, I mean, think about it. You're a congressman, senator. You are like this pseudo royalty. It's
Yeah.
like America got away from royalty, but then all of a sudden, when it comes to the Senate, Congress, and everything, you become this pseudo royalty where you don't have to interact with the people who vote for you. You get this salary. You get the salary after you're done working the position. You pretty much stay in the position until you're old. And Nancy Pelosi is like 83 years old. You just stay in these positions forever, and it gets to the point where they even have tunnels going from one building to the next because they want to avoid the common people.
Yeah.
And it's wild to see. So of course it goes to your head, of course. And then on top of that, I'm talking about your salary, but then someone like Pelosi, Lindsey Graham, talking about both sides of the aisle, his net worth is in the 9 figures. Nancy Pelosi's almost like $250 million. It's like, of
Hmm.
course, like your whole life, you're just using other people's money.
Yeah.
It's literally like a kingship. Like the people are working, their money gets piled up, and you say, okay, I'm going to take a jet here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to use first class. Like, it's just crazy. Like AOC sitting in first class. It's like, obviously that's on the taxpayer dimes. Bernie Sanders talking about, there's no way for me to travel as many places I have to travel. He's like, I have to take a jet. I'm not going to be sitting at line at Delta. And it's like, he's really saying this out loud in an interview.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course it goes to their head. They actually think there's some kind of royalty. And why wouldn't they? They have infinite
Yeah.
amounts of money that come from the taxpayers.
Yeah. It takes an extreme amount of discipline and humility to keep yourself from getting puffed up like that. I mean, my situation is I'll just describe it to you. So like when the first story popped off, I was in second period. It was Thursday a couple weeks ago. A girl turned her screen to me and said, "Mr. Mastronardi, is this you?" And I looked, and it was a Daily Mail article, and I
Uh,
thought, "Oh my goodness, they
yeah,
have millions of followers.
yeah, of course.
This is gonna blow up." And then as the days going by, like I was really just overwhelmed more than anything, and I just had no idea. Like you start seeing your face all over the internet, and but then I had more time to kind of think and calm down over it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and sort of digest everything. But you know, my I had to turn off the notifications on my phone because my phone was literally like overheating,
Yeah,
and but like people wanting to reach out to me, get me on their podcast, and go on this news outlet and this interview and that interview, and um, man, I've had to be in like constant prayer over my own my own self, right? Like I have to remember who I am.
Yes.
I I'm not the last bastion of whoever, the last person on earth fighting for free speech, right? I have
Mhm.
to I have to keep a humble view of myself.
Yes.
And so I'm gonna go mow my lawn today. I'm gonna I'm gonna change my kids' dirty diapers, and
Yeah.
like getting those touch points with reality, I think is really important, right?
Mhm.
Like, but imagine if you didn't have those touch points. You
Exactly.
can just snap your fingers and somebody's gonna bring you this. I can take a private jet. I don't have to. So, I mean, if anybody out there is listening who may end up in one of these positions one day, I think it's just worthwhile advice to say, like, keep mowing your lawn. Like,
Yeah.
don't don't untether yourself from all these touch points, because I mean, I experienced the temptation just for a short moment with how short this story has, you know,
Yeah.
it's so easy to get a puffed up view of yourself that somehow your life is more important than somebody else's, and that's just not true. We have to continually remind ourselves, like, I mean, I'm a Christian, so I'm reminding myself, like, I am a sinner who, on my own merits, like, I hate God apart from his salvific regenerative work in my life, apart from Jesus, right? Like, I have to remind myself of that, like, almost every hour of the day at this point, because, like, it can be so overwhelming, and like and it occupies my thoughts so much through the day that, like, I have to, like, sheer force of will myself to, like, remember who I actually am apart from God.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. I think what you mean by correct me if I'm wrong, you mean by that, like, our, because I'm a Christian as well, you mean
Yeah.
our natural inclination. Like, if
Yeah.
we don't have God, don't have Jesus in our lives, our natural inclination is to go against the
Yeah.
tenets.
I mean, yeah, like I said, like, before I became a Christian, I hated God. I did. I wanted to be ruler of my own life. I
Yes,
wanted
yes. I
to
know you mean.
I wanted to um live a debaucherous lifestyle.
Mhm.
I hated righteousness.
Mhm.
I did, and that's who I am apart from God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it takes we have to remind ourselves, and that's why we have to hang out and spend time with people who are like-minded in that sense, who can remind us, like, of that. And I'm not trying to put on some false humility, but that's actually the truth. The Bible says, like, our best works are like filthy rags
Mhm.
apart from Jesus. And um so to go back, like, having those touch points that bring you back to reality are very important.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those, I mean, I don't think, if I didn't have those and I was in the same position, it would probably happen to me too. And so you got to have respect the few leaders that have, like, I'm thinking, like, guys like Ron Paul, and, like, somebody else I respect is, like, Thomas Massey. And
Yeah.
they I would be curious to know, like, what do you do to sort of remain in this, like, healthy view of yourself and staying humble and stuff like that. And um
I would think it's not insulating yourself away from
yeah.
people. I think that's what it is. I forget where I heard it, because I listen to so many podcasts all the time. But somebody was talking about how sometimes it feels good to just be out and some guy bumps into you and he goes, "Hey, watch where you're going, man." And it's like, that's like a good way to, like,
Yeah.
you keep yourself in check. You're just a guy walking around. Like,
Yeah.
you're not some incredible omnipotent being or something. It's like, you're the guy in the way. Get out of the way.
Yeah.
You
I
know? So
I was reading, I can't remember where I was reading it, but I was studying up about Clarence Thomas. And when the Supreme Court goes on their recess or they take their break over the summer, he is a big fan of taking his RV, his big Winnebago, and I think he drives around the country. And one of his favorite things to do is to just park in like a grocery store parking lot and pull out a lawn chair and just sit and engage with like strangers essentially, but real citizens who are actually living in the country that has to live with a lot of the decisions that he makes.
Yeah,
And
true.
just he has the common touch. And
Yeah,
so I
that's a wonderful thing to do. I
yeah.
every 6 months, about my wife and I, we drive from Texas all the way to Canada.
Mhm,
That was one of the first drives we did. And then we want to start doing the West Coast, and we want to
mhm.
start maybe just traveling all south and touch Florida a little bit. But we love just driving around the places. And yeah, like you said, you just interact with people. We don't have a Winnebago or anything. We don't have an RV or anything like that, but we just go from place to place and just see all the different people and all the different dialects and all the different
Yeah.
customs. And yeah, it's the best thing to do. It's but again, like, just keeping yourself in contact with the people, because I think that's the biggest thing when I'm talking about these politicians. They just don't have any interaction
Mhm.
with the common people. You see it all the time in the little clips when there is some independent journalist trying to ask AOC or anybody any questions. They're insulated with people. They have people around them that will protect them from having to answer questions, from having to actually have these interactions. And they look straight ahead as if that person doesn't exist. And their assistant might even elbow the guy. It's gross. It's gross. And then I think that's the thing. It's funny because in Austin, you hear about it quite a bit. And I'm very into Joe Rogan. If you look at my channel, my main channel, um, a lot of people say that that's one of the things that he has to interact with people. Although, I will admit a lot of these people are indebted to him, right? So it's not exactly that, but he has to every day interact with a bunch of people in the green room, in his comedy club. And again, a lot of them are employees, right? Pretty much everyone around him, but he has to keep interacting with all these people all the time, and there's really no insulation. Like, when he's around, he's around. And yeah, there's a security guy that'll not let you, like, put him in a headlock or something, but he has to, like, interact with people. But I noticed that with politicians. I noticed that with comedians. Like, another comedian, this guy Joey Diaz,
Mhm.
he's like a famous comedian. Everybody knows Joey Diaz. If you know about, like, Rogan and just really raunchy, wild stand-up comedy, then you know about Joey Diaz. And when he's walking around, there's nobody. Like, I met him when I was at the Mothership, Joe Rogan's club. There's nobody. There's no security. There's no nothing. And he's
Yeah.
just a regular guy. He's just walking through the bar, and he could puff his chest out and he could say, I'm this person, I'm Joe Rogan's best friend, and he could do all that, but he doesn't. He doesn't do anything like that. You meet him and he's just a regular guy, and he's it's I think that's the key. If you want to continue being a regular person, you have to continue being a regular person.
Yeah.
Like you said, like, I have a baby as well. It's like, you got to change the diapers, and you got the diaper genie there, and you got to rip the bag out, and you got to pull that out, and it
Yeah.
stinks, and you got to bring it to the garbage, and you got to separate the recycling if you do that kind of thing. And, like, you got to just stay
Yeah.
tethered. You got to stay
You can
tethered to real life.
you can look at some of the history, you know, George Washington, he used to just accept visitors at his house in Mount Vernon.
Wow.
People would just go to his house and he would invite them in. And Abraham Lincoln, up until like the 1860s, he would he would go in a carriage as president, and it was uncovered, and citizens could just walk right up to him. And I think something really changed in like the early 1900s when with politics. Like
Mhm.
it became sort of like Hollywood, and
Yes.
we now think of them as celebrities, and they got the security guards, they got like the five, the motorcades, and all those things that like but they don't like, it's kind of like what we're saying is like they just don't have the same interaction with the people that they're serving, and it's just so unfortunate that where we're at now, because you almost have to, by the time you actually get into one of those positions, you've more than likely become one of them.
Yes, that's the thing. There is a process as you're trying to be one of those people
Yeah.
where I feel like, it might sound a little dark, but they're stripping the humanity from you.
Mm.
And it's funny you say like celebrities because that's the exact same thing that happens in Hollywood. Like I worked in film and television, and you can see when somebody's a young actor, you can see that they're willing to do anything. And
Mhm.
slowly, as they climb through those ranks, they have to deal with. We've heard little inklings of it, blackmail here, and you end up in this person's room, and blah and blah. There's all sorts of stuff that they end up doing, and politics is probably very similar in that
Yeah.
way. And then, once people go through, let's just call it a hazing process, they have no problem putting other people through that to climb up the ranks. You feel like it's kind of like a tradition. This is the way things are. And you don't want to let in other people. It gets to a point where you don't want to let in a guy
Mhm.
that's normal that doesn't go through it because you're like, well, I went through it. Why doesn't
Mhm.
he have to go through it?
Yeah.
I experienced that a lot with being in stand-up comedy. I do stand up, but I'm not good. Like I'm good enough, but I'm not like for for the I guess for the finances that I've been blessed with, that doesn't happen for someone who's like an open micer,
Mhm.
really. So some comedians will look at it and be like, screw this guy.
Like you didn't put in the time at open mic.
Yeah, yeah, like I go to open mics and I'll still go to open mics but also I have it now where I have an audience enough that if I announced a bunch of tour dates for venues that had like 100 people, I could fill those venues and
Mm.
go around and do stand up and host like a show with other comedians. And that's not cool with a lot of people who have been in
Mm.
it for 5, 10, 15 years. They're like, this YouTuber, because that's what I am. That's what they'll look at me as, this YouTuber is just doing that, and that's not fair. They're like, you should have to go through everything that I went through. It's an
Yeah.
interesting little
I mean,
dynamic.
but why do they say that? They think that you acquire some level of humility and respect by going through that process, but you may have acquired that same humility in another sphere of life
Yeah,
doing something else,
that's true.
and everybody has their own. I heard somebody say it was one of my friends on Facebook. He posted something really profound that I've always remembered. He was going through a really hard time, and he was just reflecting on his commute home, and he was at the red light, and he saw that it was merging to one lane, and the person next to him, and he's like, "Man, I gotta get off the line before so that person doesn't beat me, so I can get in front."
Yeah.
And so he punches the gas, and lo and behold, the person just turns to the right anyways.
Yeah.
So he said, "Why am I racing against people who don't have the same destination as me?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it really does no good to compare yourself to others because, like, man, I'm happy for you. I'm happy you have your success, but like, we're just on two different paths. And, well, during our time on earth, right? Like, we're called to different things. And man, your mission might be over here. God has called you to go into this field. And why am I? But we do that so often. Like, we race against people who aren't even going to the same place as us.
Yes. Yes, that's so true. So,
Mhm.
so true. Because you have no idea what somebody else's plans are. And you bring up like, oh, you might have went through it some other way. It's like, yeah, I was working in Hollywood and I was doing like
Yeah.
grunt work and
Yeah.
starting at the bottom. And before that, I was working in a factory. And that's
Yeah.
how I've lived most of my life from the time I was 15 to pretty much
Yeah.
like 30 something years old. I was working in factory jobs,
Yeah.
just picking orders and stuff like that, forklift driver. So it's like I've gotten through. I've been given that humility and been humbled many ways, just through being poor and having to work hard jobs. And it's interesting because, and you bring up like racing people that don't actually know that happens constantly. I have the most simple version of that. I run a lot, and there's a track near my house, and I'll be running, and I'm just doing, I'm trying to do like 10 miles, and
Yeah.
I'm just running, and there'll be somebody else on the track, and they're just running. I'm like, I gotta catch up. Or I'm going slow, and I'm like, they're gonna lap me.
Yeah.
Oh, lap me. And it's like they have, like, they were probably like, they started after I did. They're only running a couple laps. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a completely different thing. And yet in my head, I'm
Yeah.
like, I gotta pass this old man. I'm gonna pass this person. I'm gonna pass that person, and they're not thinking about you at all. And
Yeah.
and a lot of life is just that, you know.
Yeah, I think men specifically, like, we're so competition
Yeah.
oriented. I doubt my wife has those same thoughts, right? Like, um, and it's actually a good attribute to have, right? But sometimes it's just not properly informed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
The
way to put
drive, the competition, that those are all like God put those in men for a reason.
it.
But so often, like, our own sinful desires, like, sort of misapply it in circumstances that are we don't need to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. So true. Yeah, you gotta point it in the right direction,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
You gotta point it towards whatever your calling is, whatever God's pulling you towards. You gotta
Mhm.
focus it all there, not towards the nonsense. But,
Yeah,
when it comes to what else did I wanna talk about here?
yeah,
Oh, control. I think we covered this. Controlling what you read that
yeah,
controls what you think. That was something that came to mind in your situation. How if you're controlling what people can read and not read, you're actually, in a way, whether it's directly or indirectly, I don't know, but you're controlling what they think, you know?
yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. That's pretty much what kids are doing today in public school is like we're giving them certain things to read and, you know, guiding them towards arriving at the same conclusions. Like there's really not a lot of opportunity for meaningful thinking and allowing kids to arrive at their own opinions. And to some degree, like, they are still young, and so they need a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
But we should be preparing them to think critically and not just get them to think a certain way so they can leave this place and then get a 9 to 5 job and take out student loans and get into massive debt and go to college. And then
Yeah.
what? And
Yeah.
so we're just pumping them onto this pipeline so that they can go to college and then get really indoctrinated there.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, I've said this before, and I gave a speech on Thursday before I took some questions from the media that, like, just what my whole scenario like it reflects is this idea that, like, you're not allowed to. You're
Mhm.
not allowed to do that. You're not
Mhm.
allowed to do this or say this or think that way. And that is the most anti-education statement that, like, anybody can make, because that's a cry from a system that's more concerned about compliance than it is understanding. And that's when you fight against that system, you bubble to the top and, like, you expose yourself, and then, like, you're easy pickings, like
Mhm.
somebody like me, like, oh, we can't have him. He's going to be a loose cannon. He's helping kids think. He's more concerned about actually giving them something authentic to chew on, not actually giving, some sort of genuine context to something. Um and so I'm sort of just in their crosshairs now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sad situation. I'm sorry you're in that situation
Mm.
too. I mean, it's very stressful. I don't even have to know what it's like to be in it to know that it's extremely stressful, especially the fact that, I learned that you have kids. Like, that
Mhm.
alone is just, you want to be the provider, and, you know,
Yeah.
to have it taken away is, yeah, hard, really hard.
Yeah, I do have, I believe God has a plan that, one day at a time. That's all that's how I have to think about this, just like getting through one day at a time, because I can't think. I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know, but I do know that sometimes the darkest situations, God will use those in ways that are really powerful to grow you as a person, or to alter your life course in certain ways that it have really, will lead to blessings, right? And so, yeah, I don't know. It is tough. Um, I was gonna say something about, um, I guess it's not that important.
I was
Um,
gonna say, in you saying that, I often I've had that before. I actually had that right before I started this podcast, just the whole channel. And I had pushed myself to like get this job because I wanted to be a provider. I
mhm,
wanted to provide. I wanted to, make it so my wife didn't have to work, so we could actually, be in the roles that we really wanted to be in.
yeah,
And I had gotten this job. It was like, it was the head. I can barely remember the job now. It
mhm,
was in a headhunting company, and I was going to be in charge of like one of the departments, and it was
mhm,
the best thing ever. And it was like, I could wear a suit every day, and people who know me, people who see me on this channel, they're like, there's no way this guy wears suits, because like now I wear sweatpants and hoodies every day. But it was like you're suited up every day, and I just had to make it until that proper pay period. When you start a new job and it's like you're not getting paid this week, and it won't be at the end of that week. It's like just further away because you just started and it's just processing and everything. I was at that point, and I was doing Uber Eats. So I'm like, okay, I'll just keep doing Uber Eats. And then, I'll finish the job and do Uber Eats until like 2 in the morning, like I usually do, and I'll sleep less, and it's fine. And
mhm,
I'll make it until I can get into this job and get in the swing of things. And I just started noticing, I just started going to church. I was in a Christian men's group. I still am. Um, and I just realized, I'm like, the rent that I have to pay isn't going to fall in the right period. And the only way I'm going to be able to make rent, because I couldn't, like, I'm already messing up with my wife, I feel like, because I'm an Uber Eats driver. Like, this is not what she signed up for. That's in my head. In her head, she's like, I'll follow him to the end of the earth. But,
mhm,
so I'm like, I have to just do Uber Eats, and I can't actually go to this job. I actually have to keep doing Uber Eats so I can make rent and make the bills that need to be paid. And I remember I was doing a 3-point turn. I can remember it so clearly. I was like, why are you doing this to me, God? Like, why
mhm,
are you doing this? Like, I just got this job. I lied my ass off to get this job too. I like made a fake resume, and I was like, oh yeah, I went to this, took HR and blah, 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 all this stuff. Cause I understand HR on a really high level because
yeah,
of a lot of coursework I've done, but it's like, I didn't go to school for it. But yeah, I'm good at talking. So I was able to talk my way into this job. But I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Like, I've
mhm,
worked so hard, and like, you're taking everything away that I just worked for. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, I have to keep
mhm,
doing Uber Eats. And then I kind of, because I'm being exposed to these Christian people every day. And I remember one of them saying, like, sometimes you just have to like let God lead. And I
mhm,
had this like moment of silence where I'm like, I guess this is where like the faith part comes in, because I'm young in this whole Christian experience. Like, I got saved 3 years ago, and I'm like, I guess I just have to have faith. And then this calm came over me, and I'm like, I guess everything will just work out. And I was so upset. Like, I was in tears. I was like in the car in tears. Like, why are you doing this? This is crazy. And and then all of a sudden, I was doing the job, Uber Eats, and I was like, huh. I'm like, I guess, what do I do every day? I listen to podcasts every day. And I'm like, I guess I have time to do the YouTube thing. Like, I was already doing like some life coaching on the side and helping people. And I was like, I guess I have time to like do some coaching content online. And I'm like, I guess I'll just do that. And then I kind of felt like good. I was like, okay, I have more time to work on this thing. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that's it. And then I did this video, and it was a reaction video. My wife's like, honey, she's like, and she scared the hell out of me. I was like, what? Like, you just called me, and like, I thought something was happening. And she's like, your video got to like 800 views. I'd never had a video like get over like
mhm,
100 views. And I
yeah,
was like, really? And then I was like, huh. And then I just started, I'm like, I just kind of had this thing where I'm like, I'm going to try and do this every day for a year. Now that I have the time, God has taken this job away from me and I'm just an Uber Eats driver. I'm like, let me try and do this every day for a year and see what happens. And within like 3 months, I went from 168 subscribers to 20,000.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And it went from, my first goal was like, if I can buy you dinner, like if we could like go to a restaurant, I'm like, that would be the best thing. And the next thing you know, it's like I'm making enough money for, us. And yeah, it just kept going. And then, next thing you know, you're at 30,000, and the next thing you know, it's like this is like my job. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden it's like 3 months after that, I stopped doing Uber Eats and I was like, this is insane. Like my whole life changed.
Yeah.
And it all changes. I don't get into it too often on the podcast. I guess I kind of do, but it all changes when you just have faith in God and what he has planned for you, you know. And that was my first real, leap of faith
Yeah.
into what God was pulling me to do, and just not knowing what was going to happen and not understanding why everything had to be so hard. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
everything changed, and it was just like, yeah, it's crazy. Now I support a kid and a wife, and they're at a splash pad right now, and I'm doing this, and it's just wild what can happen, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. So yeah, you got to just have faith in what God has for you. There's definitely a reason you're going through it, and that reason is for good. It's not for bad. He doesn't have
Yeah.
bad in store for us. He only has good in store.
I heard a quote, and thanks for sharing your story. It really is just inspiring, and so I hope I can glean some inspiration and just the hope to just kind of just take it, one more day, right? One more.
Yeah.
And there's a quote that I really like. I think it was by Edward Young. He said, "Affliction is the good man's shining time." And it's like, that's so true, because, you see people who are evil, right? And when affliction kind of strikes them, it has a way of revealing itself, its true colors and what it really was. And it's like, oh man, look at that. But when everyday, just normal people are going through, something really difficult, it's like God is giving us an opportunity to be faithful. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, hey, look, are you going to follow me? Are you going to trust me? And the best part about all of it is like it takes away our opportunity to boast or to brag down
Mm.
the road, because I've certainly gone through things that were so incredibly difficult that, man, if had I not been as brought as low as I was, man, I know how selfish of a person I can be. I would probably claim some sort of credit for it and be like, man, it was my drive, it was my discipline, it was my um will to survive, right? It's like,
Mhm.
no, like I'm thinking about an experience. Maybe I'll do a video on it one of these days, but like I was just literally brought so low. And there were some health things that were a part of that. And like I felt like my bones were literally rotting inside of me. And like I was so incredibly depressed from the situation. And it and just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it got worse, right?
Yeah.
But I think maybe had it sort of broke, or like had some sort of relief up here,
Yeah.
maybe I would have claimed some of that for myself. But like I had to be broken just a little bit more, a little bit more. And
Mhm.
each person, everybody's got a story like that, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's actually a blessing from God, because like then we can't take any of the credit. He gets all the glory.
Yeah. 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 Very true. Very true. Like you have to make it. it's like he has to make it an impossible situation where you can't brag about it, because people do that all the time with what I like my friends and stuff. They're like, yeah, you put in the work, and I'm like, yeah, but like I didn't want to, like I wasn't put in, like it's weird, like I didn't plan for it. I didn't say I'm gonna put in the work. Like I was thrown into the position. Like again, like we talked about it. I don't know if it was on or off camera, but necessity, necessity just, like who else is gonna put, like God is pretty much the only one that's gonna put you into like great necessity where you have
Mhm.
to pull some stuff off,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, it's very interesting, and you can do it. You can do it, man. You should make videos. You should keep doing podcasts. You should make your own videos where you're just like, it's just you. And you should do some interviews as well. I would keep pushing on that and keep telling your story, and it's to start getting on YouTube more and more. And I you can make it happen. Like, there's no, like I always tell people, like, just try, because you have no idea what could happen. And it can
Mhm.
happen so fast. It
Yeah.
happens so fast. Like, I mean, Jordan Peterson is a great speaker and he's very smart, but he couldn't see what was going to happen
Mhm.
when he got into that situation. And then all of a sudden he's on Joe Rogan's podcast. Like, he couldn't see all of it happening
Yeah.
the way that it happened to like where he is now. It's like you just have no idea. So it's like, why not just start and try and just see what happens, because more than likely something will come of it.
Yeah.
It's not always the million subscribers and this or that. It might be a different avenue that arises because of
Mm.
it, because there's so much of what you think, there's so much of your story, there's so much of, your thought processes and education, or, whatever,
Mhm.
that all of a sudden some other opportunity comes. And the next thing you know, you're doing that. And you just never know. But yeah,
Well, I
you
mean,
just doing it.
even just being able to speak to you, I'm grateful that you reached out, and I'm going through a bit of a trial, I guess you could say. But I
Mm.
mean, it's also given me a lot of opportunities, and you reaching out, and that's one of them. And so I thank you for that. And maybe I'll make a video and I can have you on my show.
Yeah, yeah, 100% I would do that, man. It's like, yeah, you gotta just try things. Yeah, I noticed that you are trying things. There's one thing I actually wanted to talk to you about. There's
Mhm.
actually two things. One of
Yeah.
them was Bitcoin, but the other one that stood out, I saw in your podcast, you were talking with Josh Thomas, and it was
Oh
about
yeah.
homesteading.
Yeah. Do
That,
you know who
that
Josh Thomas is?
no, no, I didn't actually at all, actually.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that's a big passion of mine. Homesteading. Josh Thomas, he and his wife, they have a YouTube channel called the School of Traditional Skills, and they help people just make a go at becoming more reliant and self-resilient on some of the common like homesteading practices. So like living off the land, raising your own food. And man, it was just a fascinating conversation. I love talking with farmers. I've
Me
had
too, man.
I've talked to two on my podcast so far. One of them was Josh Thomas, and the other was Joel Salatin, who's pretty famous. And they just have such a clear view on the world, because we talked about touch points earlier, right?
Yes.
They get those touch points with nature every day, all
Yeah.
day. And like just so my wife and I, we really are trying to implement a lot of those strategies, a lot of those lifestyle changes to our home. So like we started milling our own flour. Like we don't buy any bread.
Really?
We bought a flour mill, and we buy the wheat berries, like raw, like whole wheat berries, and we grind them ourselves. And my wife bakes amazing breads, sourdough, like all these different types of breads, bagels. And we have a garden. We have chickens. I just made a chicken coop that's on wheels, and I can move it around my yard. And it's just it's so satisfying, because like God gave us this earth, right, to cultivate and work the land. You just see like his blessings being cultivated like from the land. And then like I have three kids, and one of them's 4 years old, and just being able to watch her run around our backyard and pick some snap peas off the vine and just
Yeah.
eat them, like, just from our backyard. There's just something incredibly refreshing about that. It's like we're interacting with life,
Yeah.
and, like, there's something so much bigger going on just beyond my little life, right? God has weaved this into the world, and, like, to be able to participate in that a little bit is, I wanna do more of it. Like, I can't imagine what it would be like to do that, like, all day.
Yeah.
And you talk with these farmers, and, like, they're making home medicines, they're talking about, like, the meals that they're having around the table with their families, and every one thing that I really appreciated was, like, he talked about raising kids on a farm,
Mm.
and when you do that, like, in kids, they grow up knowing that they're needed.
Yes.
Kids today, their parents don't actually need them in
Yeah.
any real sense. Like, they would be fine if they disappeared, because
Yeah.
they go to school all day. Sorry, somebody keeps ringing my doorbell.
So
They go to school, they come back, they go to soccer practice, they eat around the table maybe once, and then they go to bed and they do it all over again. But, like, when you have a homestead and, like, each member of the family has, like, a God ordained spot, and, like,
mhm.
they're actually helping, you need them. And to grow up in a house, or a home rather, and you have that feeling like, I actually participate in this family in a way that is contributes value. What does that do for a child's self-esteem and the relationship that you'd have with your parents? And man, I just really want to implement a lot of that stuff. And so I love talking with Josh Thomas. That people want a good episode to go listen to. You should go listen to that one.
Yeah, yeah. I am gonna listen to that now that I know. I just saw the word homesteading because that's like something that like I kind of, I'm not in a position to do it now, but it's like I'd love to be able to do stuff like that. Like I'm always looking at like acres and
Yeah,
how do you buy like a ranch type of area and like how all that would actually work. And yeah, man, that's something I really want to do. Speaking about having kids grow up on a farm, it's so true because my wife, she's like super like like on the Mayflower white, like for sure had slaves and stuff. She's super white. Super white. Like there's like a monument in Canada in like Prince Edward Island of like one of her forefathers. I'm like, oh, that guy had
wow,
like 100 slaves for sure. But she comes from this Mennonite bloodline where you had like her mom actually was recently just telling me something crazy about like one of her, I think it was her mom's family, like which would be my daughter's like great grandmother, and how they had to just like traverse, and they were just kind of kicked out of an area and they had to just kind of wander, and they got to the point where the it was too much for the horses, so they had to leave their all their belongings, and they could only just carry what they had. And
hmm,
like they were like Mennonites, they were like farming people, and they still have that in them. Her dad will just like build a shed by himself, and it's just like he just does that. I barely even know how to like change my own oil. And he's like building sheds. He's like like 65 years old. um but just talking about that and her grandmother has told me stories about like being on the farm and how her mother, like my wife's grandmother, her mother had to, my wife's grandmother is a
hmm,
twin,
okay,
and they were birthed just in the farmhouse, no
yeah,
anesthesia, by herself, just there, just bite on a piece of wood and just like get the kids out. Like
yeah,
it's just so different. And talking about being needed, it's so true. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but like there was like native people who would like kidnap settlers, and sometimes the settlers would go, they would get rescued and they would go back to the native tribe,
wow,
right? And a lot of it was because even at that time, back in settler time, even in that time, they felt more needed in that tribe than they did when
yeah,
they were like at home. And
Wow.
that's such a it's such a thing in society. I've talked about it on the show. It's such a thing in society because it's not just the kids. People feel like that at work. You know, when you're a bank teller, you're not needed. You
Mhm.
know, if you stopped, if you dropped dead, that they would replace you within a week.
Yeah.
We're all aware of that as we work these jobs. And I think that's, I won't say it's all of the reason, but it's a huge reason for why things feel so depressing
Yeah.
because we're not needed the way we would be needed in a
Yeah.
farm or on a tribe. We're not really necessary with the positions that we take, right?
Yeah.
Which is why you see so many people who work for themselves kind of have this different disposition because they are needed and they run their own thing. And
Yeah.
it's very different. But yeah, man, being needed is it's really, I don't know what to call it, really part of the original human reward system
Yeah.
that you
I mean,
need to need it like that.
yeah. I love what your shirt says. It says dad. And
Yeah.
I mean, imagine only having a job where you're not needed and like no family, right? Like
Yeah.
at least if you have kids, right? Like you come home every day and like I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old son, but he's not really talking or anything yet. But like
Yeah.
for my daughters at least, like in their eyes, I'm literally a superhero.
Yeah. Definitely.
And like I know I'm needed in their lives, and like there's just a huge amount of purpose that comes from being a father.
Yeah.
And so if you're only looking for that sort of satisfaction in your work, it you might have a few satisfying days there, but like over the long run, like you're trying to fill yourself with something that you weren't it was not meant to sustain you long term. Like
Yeah.
families and communities, real communities, like that is what is where we're supposed to find our belonging, I think,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. 100%, man. 100%. I mean, my kid's only she's turning 16 months, 16 months
Okay.
as of right now. And yeah, it's you find a whole other value in
Mhm.
yourself once you have them, right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And I really do think, and this might be like in the tinfoil realm, but I think there is something to the pushing of us
Yeah.
away from that responsibility of becoming husbands, fathers, mothers, wives. There's something to that where they really do seem like they're pushing you away from that. Especially it happens with young women all the time. They're working a job and they're career women, they're bosses, and then all of a sudden you're 35 and you're like, wait, hold on. Wait, wait. Hold on. Something went wrong here. And you don't even have a boyfriend, and you don't even have like a prospect of, someone to have a family with. And now you're working in this overtime where you're like, I was just focusing on this career for like 20 years. And now it's like, I don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
some of them, sadly, it becomes too late.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing to see. And I've seen it happen with so many people. And it's so sad. So sad. Because I think it's necessary. And some people hate when I say it, and you know, anybody who just can't do it, like biologically, heart goes out to you. But
Yeah.
I really do feel like that it is necessary for someone to step into that role. I think to step into the role of being a mother, of being a father. I think there's something to that. I feel like there is, it's not a Neanderthal to Homo sapien evolution type of thing, but there is some kind of evolution that happens within you as you take steps into it. And I think it's necessary for everybody. I really
Yeah.
do. I like anytime you see a guy that's just hasn't done that, has girlfriends and he's 46 years old, you can tell that there's just something off. And the
Yeah.
same thing goes with women. There's just something off about them. And
Yeah.
it's because they haven't stepped into that ultimate responsibility and took in the next step of life. I really do think that.
Yeah. I totally agree. Agree
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, man. So the whole homesteading, like that's it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. And so right now you're making your own flour. Is that what it is? You're making your flour or
Yeah, no, so yeah, we buy wheat berries. That's like the raw materials which from which flour is made,
okay.
and we put it through this grinder, and yeah, it just goes into a bowl, and it's flour, it's whole grain, and it was a learning process, and I really have to thank my wife because I mean, it was really hard at first, but like she's learned how to do it, and we're only on a third of an acre. We live in the suburbs,
Yeah.
and but you can still implement a lot of these homesteading practices. But like our family, we had a lot of GI issues in our family,
Me too.
and when we switched to fresh milled flour, a lot of those things really cleared up. Like, and we're not gorging ourselves with bread all day, but like,
Yeah.
slice of toast here, homemade burger buns. We do sandwich breads. We do crackers. We do bagels, pancakes with fresh milled flour and pizza dough. And it's yeah, we pretty much only like we have not bought bread in over a year and a half.
That's amazing. And you're also you're kind of skipping like you talk about GI issues, you're kind of skipping the process where they like spray it all with like glyphosate
Oh yeah,
and just
yeah,
skipping that whole process. A lot of people believe that's what the GI issues actually are because
yeah.
a lot of people report like going to Italy where they don't do that kind of thing and all of a sudden they can eat pasta and like all
Yeah,
sorts
I
of
have a coworker who has a non-celiac's GI related like gluten intolerance.
Me too. Yeah, that's what I got.
She went to England, France, Italy, and Spain, and she ate croissants, she ate French bread, she ate Italian bread, pasta, she ate everything, and she was fine.
Wow.
And she comes back and she tells me that story, and I was like, man. And so I made her some fresh milled flour tortillas,
Hmm.
and I said, look, I just want to see what happens when you eat these. Like, can you just like be my guinea pig, eat them
Yeah.
one time? But um, she said that there was only mild discomfort.
Okay.
So the wheat was still grown in the United States, so maybe there's still like a little bit,
Yeah.
but there was a drastic improvement, and maybe it's just people need to wean themselves back on, and everybody's going to have a different scenario. But I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to that, man. Growing your own stuff, having some kind of homestead. I
We
really
have
think
a we have a peach tree,
oh
and
yeah?
like I'll tell you, there is nothing like waking up early. The dew is still on the grass, and it's just a nice summer day, and maybe like the sun's just coming up, and like you don't have to pick because all the peaches that you buy in the store, like they are picked early and then they ripe as they're being in transportation, right?
Of course.
Well, these you can wait till like peak ripeness when they're on the tree. And so
Yeah.
like just going out there and picking one off and taking a bite like in your own backyard, like there is something truly special about that, and they taste so good.
Yeah, I really want that. I really want that. It's funny you like talking to farmers. I feel the same way. I've met some because I'm always going to farmers markets and trying to find farm fresh eggs and meat and stuff like that. And the conversations you have with these farmers is really different. I met this woman. She's an eighth generation farmer in Texas, and it was just so wild to hear. You're talking about your daughter,
Mhm.
grabbing the snap peas and everything, and it's like her life's like that on steroids. So it's like
Yeah,
watching the grandfather, watching like just generation after generation. It's like this is just what they do.
yeah,
This is how they make their living. It's not even just for fun. It's like this is how they make their living. This is the only way to live for them. It's so beautiful to see. Like I
yeah,
love it. I really wanted to have her on the podcast, but it's like when it's funny because maybe I'll be able to talk to your friend there, Josh Thomas, but you're talking to some of them and they're just like, why would I sit down and talk to you? We're talking right now. Like,
yeah,
what do you mean?
yeah,
like
yeah,
they're just disconnected from that. They're like, well,
yeah.
we're gonna get in
Josh
front of
would
a
most
what?
like he would talk to you because they put out content, and so he has an appreciation for YouTube. Like they have over 800,000 subscribers on their one channel. So you could probably have a good conversation with him. what you said earlier is like being an 8th generation farmer. Think about this, like people have a innate desire to be a part of a story,
Mhm.
right? That could be a cause for a lot of depression for a lot of people to know that, like, hey, I'm single, I don't have any kids, my story ends after I die. Like that actually is a really depressing thought.
Yeah.
But to also have like this connection, like you have the continuity of a story when you're an 8th generation farmer. You're also connected to a plot of land that like your great 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 grandfather cultivated that land.
Yeah.
And just imagine, like, you're not even just, you don't have continuity because like um your offspring, like your lineage has continued. You have continuity knowing that like you're walking on the same ground that like your 5 times great grandfather walked.
Yeah.
And like imagine, like, I have a picture of my great grandfather who is from Italy. I never met him, but I get, when I look at him, I actually see some of our family resemblance,
For sure.
and I feel something when I'm thinking about him, like, man, what did he go through? What kind of things was he into? But like, imagine if you could walk through his house
Yeah.
and see where, and think his thoughts after him, like to have that extra layer of being on the land. I mean, I think that would just be there's no really words to describe that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's so necessary to go back to, like you said your great grandfather from
Yeah,
Italy?
my great grandfather came from Italy.
Yeah, that's why it's so necessary to like go to those places. Like
Yeah.
my grandparents are from Cuba
Mm,
on my dad's side, and going to Cuba is funny because my dad is born in Jamaica, right? So they were Cuban, and Cuba was a terrible place, so they
yeah.
went to Jamaica, immigrated legally and did what they had to do. And then my dad's born there and everything. I go to Cuba. I don't have a relationship with my dad. I'm estranged from my dad. He like disappears. And I go to Cuba not knowing this at all. And every Cuban person's like, "You're Cuban." And I'm like, "No, no, I'm not. I'm no." And they're like, "No, no, no, no. You're a Cuban person." Everywhere I go, and I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm not. Trust me."
Yeah.
Like, I do not speak Spanish. I'm not.
Yeah.
And then, years later, reconnect with my dad. And then I find out from my sister, because she's doing all the lineage. She's like, "Yeah, we're Cuban." And I was like, wow, that's so weird,
Yeah.
and just being in that place where, grandparents, probably great
Yeah.
grandparents, they were there. And it's like to the point where the locals could see it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even try to talk to me in English. They would immediately start talking to me in Spanish. And I'd be
Yeah.
like, I don't, that's not. And it's just so odd the way that works.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to just go back to those places. Always be proud of where you are, in
Yeah.
America, but if you can go back to those places and just check it out, like if you can find out where your great grandfather's from in Italy, do you know where he's from in Italy?
Yeah, he's from central Italy in a place called Campobasso, which
Wow,
I would love to go there.
that
And
sounds like a small place.
yeah, it's a smaller town.
That means that if you walk that full town, you'll walk in his steps for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Which would be
That's
really cool. Like it goes back to like you have this connection to the past that
yeah.
just it comes alive in that moment.
Yeah. And then figure out, I don't know what you know about them, but it's like figure out if they were, like right now you're like into farming and everything. Like when I was coaching people, I was coaching this woman, and she was
Yeah.
like, she's a real estate agent and she's really into land and everything. And you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just
Okay,
gonna
okay, cool.
make sure I fix this.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
And she's like really into land and like real estate and this and that. And then later on, she figures out that she's like from Guyana, and
Mhm.
she figures out that her grandfather, or like maybe great grandfather, was so into land. Like he bought
Mm.
an enormous amount of land, and he had so much land that he would like gift people acres of land. Like he just had this tremendous amount of land. And it's just so funny that she's like so into real estate, and it's just her own original thought that she
Yeah.
wants to be in real estate. But then all of a sudden it's like you look back and it's like
Yeah.
it's like
Maybe
in her blood.
yeah, maybe there's a just like this genetic thing, like
Yeah.
our interests. Maybe our interests just I don't know. That seems more than just a coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You never know. So you might have like a great great grandfather, and he was like, "They said I could not say the N word," and I said, "Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah.
The contents of the word is what matters."
Yeah. Maybe that's why he left Italy.
Man, but yeah, it's something to think about. But yeah, when I saw that, when I saw the homesteading
Yeah.
conversation, I was like, "Oh, that's very, very
Yeah.
interesting."
That was
So what are you thinking in later in life? Are you thinking a ranch? Or are you thinking homestead community thing, or like what?
yeah. I mean, right now, I think, and we talked about it on that podcast. So often people will wake up one day and they'd be like, I'm going to drop everything and I'm just going to become a homesteader. And you so rarely does that actually work out for people
Mm,
because usually it was fear that drove them to that decision. And when you make decisions out of fear, it usually is not a good thing.
yeah.
But right now we're just trying to acquire skills like one at a time.
Mm,
And, each time adding more things. So like the next project is we're gonna slaughter some chickens here,
mm.
um, and we got them. They're getting raised in the backyard, and we're gonna learn how to do that ourselves. We're
You
gonna learn.
you 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 have them now?
Yeah, we have chickens. They're not quite ready yet, but they
Yeah.
are. We've had chickens like hens for eggs before,
Hmm.
but this is our first time doing like meat chickens. And so
Wow.
we have a device that's gonna rip all the feathers off, and you um, like just the way you drain the blood and you do all that, like we're gonna learn how to do it ourselves. And we got a big freezer and just trying to become a more autonomous, self-reliant person that's like, we are in touch with like the resources God gave us to sustain life.
Yeah.
And I just had a conversation with Joel Salatin about this, like God created life. And in order for something to live, something has to die.
Mm,
And that's a profound spiritual concept that God has weaved into the fabric of reality of nature. And there's profound spiritual outworkings of that too, because like Jesus, our Savior, had to die in order that we may have eternal life.
yeah.
But we even see it very practically in our everyday life that like plants, right? Like even on like a micro level, like there are like bacteria and different microorganisms that are dying in order that like a plant can eat. And then
Yeah.
there's animals that are the plants are dying so that the animals can eat. And
Hmm.
um, you really lose sight of that. Like if all you do is go to a grocery store, and I'm not knocking people that haven't stepped into homesteading, but like maybe just think about this. Like we consume meat from animals that have been raised on these farms where they live on a concrete floor, they never see the sun, and like God made animals, like he made chickens to express chickenness,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a chicken's glory is being out in the grass pecking little things and eating worms and
Hmm.
and it's like so you can actually honor the life of an animal by letting it express its nature.
Yeah.
And then like when it's killed, like it just connects you closer to that reality of like death, that like
Yeah.
something has to die, and it makes you appreciate it, I think, a little bit more, especially when you come around a table to eat with your family. And
Hmm.
but I think the honor you give to an animal is like how you treat it when it was alive. Um and I'm not perfect at that. Like I still go to the store, I buy my meat there and stuff, but like just one at a time, trying to sort of incorporate these into our lives.
Yeah.
It's been a cool journey, and I'm looking forward to taking it another step.
That's very, very admirable. very noble to take that on step by step. That's kind of what we're doing. We want to figure out, first step is to, we were talking like real estate agents, and I'm like, I guess I have to be in a place where there's like no homeowners association so you can actually have
Yeah.
chickens,
Yes.
because that's the first thing that I want to do, because I love eggs. Eat them
Yeah.
every morning. I'm starting to get farm fresh ones in the area, but I would love to be able to have a hold of that process. and
Yeah, and
and
then when your daughter goes out there to grab the eggs in the morning,
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
so much fun for them, and they're helping. They're
Yes.
absolutely helping at that, and
Mhm.
it's like they feel that, and it's a joy for them to help, and it's just like what we were made for, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's what we were made for, to be doing things like that. Especially me, like, I mean, I don't know what they were doing in Cuba, but on my mom's side, she comes from a farm town. Like, she's from
Mm,
Barbados, and there's like the built up part of Barbados, and then there's like the country. And she's from the country. Like, you're talking about slaughtering chickens. Like, that's something she just
yeah,
had to do growing up. That was just like what you did. There was no other option really, because of like the time. It was like, it wasn't like there was no grocery stores, but in Barbados, in the country, you pretty much weren't going to a grocery store, especially
mhm,
when you lived like in a farm town. Like, that
yeah,
wasn't happening. You did that yourself. So she always would tell me stories. She'd be like, you know what happens when you take off a chicken's head? And I'd be like, no. She'd like, they run around. Because like Barbados, they don't have the proper thing where they're hanging up and stuff. It's
yeah,
just like you just let it run around until it's done. And then you're just
wow,
picking up and you just start taking the feathers out and doing everything like that. And I'm like, wow. Like, it just seems so foreign, but it's just a generation away. Like, she was
yeah,
just doing that,
yeah,
less than like 60, 65 years ago. She was just doing that as a little kid.
yeah,
And it's like, it's why it, like, if it can go away that fast because of quote unquote convenience, I feel like we can bring it back
yeah,
just as quickly. So I'm hoping to be able to do stuff like that. And then cattle. I would love to get cattle. Like, I'm really looking at a ranch. Like, that's what
mhm,
I want. I like having a lot of land. I think that's very necessary, even if it's just going to be you and your family out there, and hunting. Like, that's the
yeah,
next thing. Like, I want cattle. I want to be able to hunt. There's a bunch of things like I want to know how to do, you
yeah.
know?
It it yes, just one skill at a time, and yeah, no need to rush, but, like, those are noble goals, I think, and yeah, you should do it, I should do it, everybody should do it.
Yeah, man. So also you're into Bitcoin.
Yes.
How, like, just to give the contrast here, we're talking about farming and then also Bitcoin. What got you into Bitcoin? What was your shining moment there?
Sure. So, there's actually a lot of similar aspects between homesteading and Bitcoin.
Okay.
You gotta ask yourself, what does homesteading and farming like, it allows you to be your own grocery store.
True.
Bitcoin allows you to be your own bank,
True. True.
and it makes you a more autonomous individual that is less reliant on a lot of these legacy mainstream financial systems. Homesteading makes you less reliant on the supermarket superstructures and the corporate farming, right? That's bad for us. And Bitcoin allows a person to navigate themselves autonomously in this financial world, and you can circumvent the banks.
Yeah.
So I actually see a lot of overlap between those two areas, but like Bitcoin specifically, what got me into it was COVID 2020 stimulus checks. And just thought to myself, like, how is everybody getting $1,500? Like,
Yeah.
they're just printing it. Like, they just print it. And so it sent me and my brother actually on this rabbit hole of like the question, what is money?
Hmm.
Is it just a piece of paper? Is it just something you buy things with? But then we learned that like money stores your life energy. You trade your time for money
Yeah.
so that you can redeem it at a future date and time.
Hmm.
Right? Like you could mow a lawn for 20 bucks or you could mow a lawn for $20 worth of apples.
Hmm.
right? You would probably prefer not to get paid in apples because like you can't redeem the apples somewhere else.
Yeah.
You can't save the apples for a month or two. So apples are not good money. Money allows you to trade your time and labor so that you can trade it for something down the road.
Hmm.
And when governments just print money, they devalue the worth of the money,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
Because of inflation and the money's worth less.
Hmm.
But if you know what money is, it's actually your time stored. So what are they actually devaluing? They're devaluing your life, they're devaluing your labor.
Wow.
And so they're stealing your life away. You have to work more hours,
Hmm.
more time to make the same amount of money. And that's what inflation is. And we don't vote for that. It's a tax. And so it sent me on this like journey about just like learning like what is Bitcoin. And I learned that Bitcoin is money. It's digital money, but there's a finite amount of it. Like there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin
Yes.
and nobody controls it. Nobody controls Bitcoin and it's decentralized. And we've never in the history of humankind have never had a purely decentralized money that governments cannot corrupt.
Yeah. True.
So just the reason I got into this is like I'm sort of bent towards freedom, I'm bent towards free speech, I'm bent towards individual liberties. And if I tried to wire transfer money to Nigeria, my bank is going to say, "Why are you sending this money there? How much
Mhm.
money are you going to send there?" Eh, we're going to put a hold on the money for 2 weeks, and then we'll let the money go. It's like, wait,
Yeah.
this is my money, right? I traded my time for it, my time, my energy, my skills, and you should. But now it's controlled. There's all these different third parties along the way that can control it. But Bitcoin, I don't need anybody's permission. I can send money to whoever I want, whenever I want, however I
Yeah.
want. Like, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And I can be an autonomous person, and I don't need this financial system. I can exit the system and be an autonomous person. Like Bitcoin is very similar to cash. Like if you were here physically with me, I could hand you $5, and there's only two parties in that system.
Yeah.
There's me and there's you. I don't have to hand it to the bank and then the bank hands it to you. Well, Bitcoin functions very similar to that.
Yeah.
There's
True.
no there's no third party involved in the transaction. Like even if you're in China, I can digitally send money from me directly to you, and
Mhm.
there's no third party in between that can stop that transaction from going through because it's a purely market based system, and
Yeah.
it's it really is a once in a species type of invention. It's akin to the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I definitely I didn't see it that way at first because when I first heard about it, it was really early, really,
Yeah,
really early. And it's like one of those things where you're just like, wow, I wish I knew differently.
yeah,
'Cause I remember, I remember I was smoking a joint back when I used to smoke weed. This is like
yeah,
years ago. And some guy's like, I'll give you Bitcoin if you give me like what you have left. And I'm like, get out of my face. I'm
hmm,
like, give me money. Yeah.
yeah,
The guy would have gave me like 20 Bitcoins. He would have gave me so many
yeah,
Bitcoins at that time because it was so young. That was back when people were ordering pizzas with Bitcoin,
yeah.
back in that time, and then I had a friend who Bitcoin, there was an explainer video made.
Hmm.
And then the next like two or three explainer videos that were made for different platforms, different coins, he made them all. And every time he would make one, he would tell the people, he'd be like, just give me your coins. Like whatever your thing is, give me your coins. Like
Hmm.
just whatever it is. Okay, that's your thing. Okay, give me a bunch of those coins. And then he's like, It's so funny. I have a vlog. I used to do a vlog. It's on this channel. And there's a time where I'm getting out of a subway and you can hear me saying, man, I don't have $500 to put into this Ethereum thing that you're talking about.
Mm,
Like you can hear me saying it. It's like, it's not like I'm not, it's just, you can overhear it in the
yeah,
audio because it was like Ethereum was at like 50 cents. And he's like, please just put this money into Ethereum. And I'm like, no, I can't. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
he did over and over and over and over and over again. And it netted him a lot of money, a lot. And to the point now he works in the space. He helps people build companies and stuff. So he is well off. And he helped me understand it from there.
yeah,
Like, yeah, he really drilled it in of what this is and exploring the space and everything. So I got a
but
really understanding.
there's definitely a reward for being early. I mean, even
Yeah.
with any of the other, but we're still so early when it comes to Bitcoin. Like that's what
Yeah,
people
he still says that. He's like it's still early. He's like, you
we're
just
still
don't know.
so early. And I am proudly Bitcoin only. Like I don't mess around
Oh
with
yeah.
any
Oh,
any other cryptocurrencies.
okay.
I am I am Bitcoin only. I bleed orange, you can say.
Yeah. That's funny. He was like that, and then he actually shifted obviously like Ethereum, and then he shifted into a lot of altcoins. And that's when his like net worth went from
Yeah.
like 6 figures to like 8 figures. Because it was
Yeah, but
just,
I bet he
there's all these rushes, right? Like you had to
yeah.
really understand. And he was like really into tech. So he like was meeting with all the companies and talking and
Yeah.
just doing the legwork that nobody else wanted to do in that time.
Yeah. I think Bitcoin is going to reprice the entire world. I think um and so the problem with a lot of these other altcoins is like Bitcoin, Ethereum is sitting at the same price as it's been, like the last 4 years. It hasn't really ever, you
Yeah, it
know,
has.
climbed to 60,000, 70,000, 80,000, and like
Yeah.
Ethereum is still just always sitting at the that $2,500 mark, like
Mhm.
and it's centralized. It's not decentralized like Bitcoin is. Like
Mm.
there's an Ethereum foundation, and it has like board of directors, and there's
Mm.
real people behind computers who are kind of controlling the system. And if they really wanted to, they could delete transactions, they could control their blockchain.
Yeah.
Well, Bitcoin is in the hands of the users.
Yeah.
You can't sue Bitcoin.
Yes.
You could sue Ethereum. You
True.
could sue Ripple. You
True.
can't take gold to court. You can't take land to court. You can't take Bitcoin to court.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of like you can't take the internet to court. The internet is just sustained by the users, and
Yeah.
um, that's why Bitcoin is. I just had a conversation with a guy named Jeff Booth, who if people are in the Bitcoin space, they know who he is, and he says, the internet is a protocol. Protocols are winner take all systems. There's no competition with protocols. The internet is a protocol. There's only one internet.
Yeah.
You can't get on a different internet.
Yeah.
Well, Bitcoin is a protocol, and it's a winner take all system.
Mhm.
Eventually, probably maybe not even in my lifetime, but like eventually protocols take everything, and there's no competition there, and Bitcoin will reprice the world. Like the world gets cheaper on a Bitcoin standard. Like 5 years ago, it cost 500 Bitcoins to buy a house. Today it costs like two.
Yeah. 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 It's true, man. It's true. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff, man. Yeah, it's just interesting that you're into that as well. But yeah, you're 100% right. Like I don't talk about it much. It doesn't come up. My stuff's like a lot of political, and then we go
Yeah.
esoteric and things like that. So I never talk about it, but I definitely have a understanding of how deep it goes and how many options there are. Yeah, I know you just stay in Bitcoin, but it's like when you really like travel the space and look into
Mhm.
everything, it's like a lot of interesting things are happening. But yeah, it's all so young. It's all so young.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Very interesting stuff. But yeah, I don't talk about it so much. But I just have that one friend who just completely
Yeah. He made a lot of money.
changed. Yeah. Yeah. a crazy amount. And yeah, he's loving life, working
Mhm.
hard, loving life, and just still working in the space, still going to the conferences and meeting with people who are starting this and starting that, and adding value where he can, because he's a 3D modeler. So he makes 3D models, and he can help people with like metaverse type things, and he's getting really into the virtual reality space. And yeah, he's working on a lot of different stuff. I'm
Cool.
trying to get him on the podcast, but it's hard. It's
Yeah.
been very hard. He doesn't want to talk about it all. I've been telling him to start a YouTube channel forever.
Yeah.
I'm like, you went from being broke to multi-millionaire. Like,
Yeah.
you should probably talk about it. Like, at least, just to inspire some people.
Mhm.
But he's people like that are usually a little standoffish.
Yeah. I'm pretty passionate about Bitcoin. I volunteer a lot of my time. I don't get paid, but I teach free classes with my brother. We do free classes here locally, and anybody is welcome to come. And we teach people about Bitcoin and how and what money is, and it's changing people's lives. Just one small bit at a time. It's cool.
Yeah, it definitely changed my life. I mean, just indirectly through him, definitely changed my life trajectory, like, fully.
Mhm.
When it comes to the school system today,
Yeah,
what are you because like, what are you seeing right now?
yeah.
I know, like, here's the thing. It's funny enough because we were just talking, at the beginning of this whole thing. We're talking about teachers who are, pushing these ideologies, and it's completely fine. And we see a lot of teachers now who are becoming like activist types, where they're making the flag. Like, I saw one teacher being like, "Oh, I won't have an American flag for the kids to pledge allegiance to, but they can pledge allegiance to this flag." And it's like, and like, nothing happens to these teachers.
Mhm.
But I noticed that in seeing your story, seeing Winston's story, there is, like, talking about God and everything. There's no good without bad. There's no bad without good. So it's like, as much as I see these teachers and I go, wow, like, I'm definitely homeschooling my kids. Like, my wife has agreed, we're homeschooling. But when I see I feel like teachers like you become the counter to that. You become the good
Mhm.
side of that whole thing that actually grows from it. Where there's some that want this group think and this hive mind, and then there's others who are like, and you should be able to read books and think critically. And I think it's weird. It's like the yin and the yang there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we should, as much as possible, like, and people are fallible, people are going to make mistakes, but like, it'd be so much better if we had a understanding on a consensus on like what is good.
Mhm.
And that's really one of the hardest things about being in a public school today is like they can't answer that question.
Hmm.
It's on just individual teachers, and you're crossing your fingers that your kid has good teachers.
Yes.
You're crossing your fingers that, man, hopefully my kid does not have some activist, social liberal, social justice warrior teacher who's going to make them pledge allegiance to the gay pride flag.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
like hoping. There are a lot of good people in the system, but until it can answer like that transcendent narrative, like, walk into a public school and ask a teacher, ask a student, and just ask them, "What are you doing here?" You're not going to get a consensus. You're not going to get a solid answer.
Yeah.
The consensus today says, so I can go to college and get a good job.
Mhm.
They're not the transcendent unified narrative isn't something that actually feeds a person's soul. And
True.
that's just where this system is wholly lacking. It doesn't feed the whole person. And so kids they aren't getting like a really great education. They're getting schooled. They're learning how to do school. And that's like the most harmful thing, I think.
Yeah.
'Cause they're
Yeah.
not learning how to critically think. Like, you look at like the routines of prisoners at a prison, and you compare that to what students are doing at schools, and there's a lot of similarities. Like
Wow.
this bell rings,
Mhm.
they go to another place, they go get their food on a tray, and then the bell rings, they have to go be here, be there, and then, they're just constantly going through and hopefully in between those bells, there's a teacher who loves them and cares about them and is helping them learn how to think critically and to guide them. But a lot of times we see that's not the case. It's being taught a certain script, and there's no real deep well of knowledge that they're being allowed to draw from. And I even feel that to some degree, because it's like when I'm in functioning in this system, I know that there's guardrails that I have to
Mhm.
stay between. And a kid asks me a spontaneous, really thought provoking question, and man, I would love to just help facilitate some thinking here. But even the system of public school, like, forces me to self-impose these guardrails on myself because I don't want to get in trouble or this or that. And it just kind of it sucks the soul out of education.
True. True. Yeah. Ah, yeah, I agree. I really agree. I mean, I haven't been in a school in a long time, but
Yeah.
I have friends who their kids are older than mine and, not only just sucking the soul out, but just some weirdly weird stuff. Like my buddy, like he almost got in a lot of trouble because he went and confronted the entire school, basically, all the teachers and everybody, because he has a little girl and the teacher of that class decided to implement a rule where you weren't allowed to say no. And he has a little girl.
Mm,
So, you just, if you think about the worst possible things, she's not allowed to say no. And she came home with that, and he was livid. I mean, this is like a
yeah.
big tattooed guy. He's changed his life, but it's like he's just seeing red, and he storms in there, and he wants to know what's going on. And they're just like, "Oh no, it's just because no is a negative affirmation, and we're trying to not to have negative affirmations in the class." And he's like, What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
He's like, What the hell are you saying to me?"
Yeah.
It's just so crazy. Then another instance, like they let his kid leave with someone that wasn't him or
Mm,
the mother, and thankfully they actually knew the person. But thankfully they actually knew the person. It was like a landlord of like where they live, and he was taking another kid. So, but he just went to his school and he's like, "Where's my kid?" And they're like, "Oh, she left already." And he's just like, "What the like he's just so done with the school system. He's like about to start homeschooling like I want to. He's like
yeah.
looking into the curriculum and stuff because he's just like, what's happening? Like one day my daughter comes home and says she can't say no. The next day she's not there when I go and try and pick her up. Like it's
A
just
lot of
wild.
times what you have happen is you have people who end up as teachers who are very ideologically driven,
Mhm.
and they think it's a perfect time to experiment on your child.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And let me try this thought exercise I saw one of my favorite activist YouTubers talking about. Like, let me just try it out on these kids. And
Yeah.
like, and they think they're doing something good for these kids,
Mhm.
and they're steering them either explicitly or implicitly towards their own worldview. And they're not trying to help them think critically. They want to separate them from some of the values that they might be getting from their parents,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
those are outdated, those are too conservative, or those are too traditional. And your parents should respect your pronouns, and just things like that. Like you see it like in a lot of these videos that like surface, you know, on libs of TikTok and things like that, where
Mhm.
teachers are just admitting to what they're doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
They're not even trying to hide it.
Yeah. That's what I notice. And they don't
Yeah.
get reprimanded, it
No.
seems. That's the craziest part. They don't get reprimanded, they don't get talking to or anything. It's like
Mhm.
they just fall on the right side of, what is, quote unquote, what is right currently, and they're completely in the clear for what they do. I saw California. I don't know how it is where you are. California had something where the teachers don't have to tell the students' parents if they like change pronouns or something like that. They don't
Yeah.
have to actually let the parents know. So it's like this private thing the student and the teacher could have
Yeah.
together, which is like, yeah,
It's sick. It's literally sick. It's
at that point, private things like that with just your teacher, it's not a good, it's not a, like, it's a slippery road to go down. But again, it kind of, again, like, I go into the tinfoil realm. It kind of makes sense of what they're trying to pull off. They are trying to, and I've seen it, and people can argue it if they want. There is an attack on the nuclear family
mm,
and that structure. And if you can all of a sudden have private conversations or private knowing abouts with your student that the parents aren't privy to, it kind of you're undermining what the mother and father should be in that structure with the kid, right?
yeah.
You're kind of wedging yourself in there. And again, it's all to just disrupt that whole nuclear family. I
Yeah.
really do think so, because I've talked about it before. When you have a strong nuclear family, it's almost like a brick to a building, and when you have this nuclear family, and you have a bunch of them in a community, it's a strong structure, and it can't really be penetrated. And when you have, like, when your whole thing is like God and then family, nation, once you have that hierarchy, and then you have this strong nuclear family, it's very hard for anyone in power to sway you in your beliefs.
Yeah.
So I think it's like a purposeful thing, honestly.
Well, schools, they pretend to be communities when they're actually networks.
Mhm.
So John Taylor Gatto, he's one of my favorite authors. He was an educator. He talks about this, and like, think about, like, answer, like, what is a network? A network, right, it's a group of people, right, that you're a part of, and you're allowed to associate with in a very narrow range for a very narrow purpose.
Mhm.
Might be part of a club or a job networking, but like, it would be weird if you went to your network and you said, "Hey guys, talk to me about like your marriage," or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Because that's outside of the purpose of the network. A
Yeah.
community is meant to tackle those sort of issues. And communities are pretty rare, right? It's like you got your family and your church. Usually people you can't be a part of 20 communities.
Yeah.
People are a part of networks for a very narrow purpose, and that's what school is. But it pretends to be this community to try to replace your own family, and
Yes.
say like, "Hey, once an eagle, always an eagle. You'll always have a place here at West Valley," or
Yeah.
it's like, "No, you won't. If I moved away, you would forget about me in literally a week."
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of damage that can be caused to children or young kids when you have a network that is parading itself, pretending to be a community. And so it can just cast all your cares on this network, pretending to be a community. And then it actually can't respond in the proper familial, community based way that a real community or a real family could. And it's not the job of the school to do that, to
Yeah.
meet the needs of those children in that way, and you can end up doing a lot of harm to kids that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. That's true. When do you think that started? The whole trying to masquerade as a community.
Um, I one of my favorite thinkers, economists is Thomas Sowell,
Yeah.
and he talks about how when he was in public school, in the 30s and 40s, he received a great education.
Mm.
And I believe them. I take him at his word. But I think even you could even see back then when you started moving away from like one room schoolhouses into like these big behemoth institutions that, because I think even one room schoolhouses were a lot more communal than what you see today.
Mm,
And so like I think it was when there was that transition, and then when you made teaching like more of a it became more of a profession that was like, um it sort of like, because before it was like maybe just a member of the community who loved teaching, who loved children, and maybe the families in the schoolhouse would pool some money together to help sustain this person's job, right? But then you had like the professionalization happen of teaching. You have teacher colleges and special licensing for teaching,
mm,
in the mid 20th century, and they sort of outsourced it to the colleges. And then
uh,
a lot of those liberal ideologies in colleges started working its way in, and it's just, then you have to go through this system to get a teaching degree, to get a teaching license, right? Like once you get a teaching license, you are deemed an expert in teaching,
yeah.
and you're, which is just a load of BS,
Yeah,
right?
of course. That's like saying, okay, you have your wisdom certificate.
Yeah. And so I think like the whole 20th century is just about that story of like moving away from communities teaching kids to the professionalization of this field. And that's when it really kind of became what it is. And there's a whole bunch of different streams and rivers that flow out of that. Like you have book publishers and unions and
Yeah.
monopolies on this that are all affecting it. But I think largely it has to do with that, because like teachers enjoy the privileged status of like not having to like, the free market doesn't judge whether they did a good job or not.
True.
And so teachers enjoy this privileged status of like, hey, I'm an educator, I have all these degrees, and you get to wear, this status of a professional,
Mm.
yet you never have to really face the results or the consequences of the quality of what you deserve, give.
Yeah, that's so true.
Like
Like,
if you didn't make good content, you're not going to get subscribers, you're not going to get views, and
yep.
the free market would either reward you or punish you.
Hmm.
Well, in education, the free market is squashed. It doesn't punish me or reward me. Well, I'm just rewarded. Like every year I get paid a little bit more, and it doesn't matter if I did a great job or a mediocre job or what. And because it's untethered from that system.
True. Huh. Wow. Yeah, that's something to think about, man. Because yeah, I guess I grew up in that whole teaching thing. I just remember back when I was a kid, you just didn't know anything about teachers.
Yeah.
And that always seemed like the best thing. You just didn't know much about them. But there was still, yeah, in my experience, there were still ones that wanted you to think.
Yeah.
There were the ones that would treat you like an adult, not in any kind of weird way, but in the way of like, what do you mean by that? Like, explain yourself as
Yeah.
you're saying this thing. And that was always good. But yeah, I don't know when it got so bad. Like when it got so bad. Like I guess I just wasn't there. I think.
Yeah. I mean, think of I think of just like I graduated high school in 2011,
Mm,
and I think back to like my childhood when I was in elementary school. You know, I think I'm like literally that I caught the very tail end, like just the very tail end of like, I had a home phone. I had to like call my neighbors across the street and say,
yeah,
"Hey, can you come out and play?" And we'd be out on our bikes, and we would literally be gone all day.
yeah.
And so like we had that like counterweight
How
to
old how old are you now?
I'm 32.
Yeah. You would be the very tail. Like I'm 39
Yeah.
and I can remember all that very well. And yeah, you would be the very end of
I
that. I
think I
think.
caught the last little smidge of it. And I think that helped give me some value as a kid, but like a lot of the same structures in school are all there that like, and I think it did a lot of harm. And everybody who went through that system is suffering that same thing. Like you have to unschool yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like you made a podcast and you have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Like what if you let a kid today work on a project like that? Like,
Yeah, right.
it would seem so foreign, right? If you
Yeah.
saw a 15-year-old kid who has a knack for speaking and making content, like, and you know he doesn't want to read this boring book, like you say, look, drop everything. I want you to create a YouTube channel and I want you to tell stories and go out and find the stories that you find are interesting,
Yeah.
right? Like give a kid a project that he's passionate about. Like you would just think like, oh, you couldn't let a kid have that much creativity, right? Like he needs to learn how to read and write and like
Yeah.
as if he's not ever gonna learn how to do that. Um, and so when we graduate from these places, like I imagine you had to like break free from a lot of the conventions that you were taught growing up from what you were learned in school.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I had to yeah, talk about unlearning, but I mean, I was lucky. I am I guess you say I'm lucky. I was a high school dropout.
Mm,
So I started high school and got 1 credit for my first year of high school. And then the next year, I think I got 2 credits. And then I dropped out. So I didn't even get through like I didn't have even 1 year of credits for high school. And then grade in elementary school, the last 2 years, I kind of woke up to the fact where they would always say that you'd have this speech that you had to do every year, and it would be 50% of your grade for English. And I would never do it. And then by my estimation, because I didn't do any work, I was like, I'm going to fail. And then they put me through. And I was like, oh, so I don't have to do anything that they're saying because they just kind of keep pushing me through.
yeah.
And I kind of just rode that high school, got out of high school, started working. And there's still a lot of things to unlearn because it's not just school that pushes things on you. It's your whole surroundings and television and movies and everything. So as I got older, like 20, I started like doing psychedelics and stuff.
Mm,
And delving into the internet and finding like Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna and finding podcasts where they just were talking about such weird things and really started to unlearn things there, and the little documentaries that would come out like the Zeitgeist and stuff like that, and everybody was talking about it and like stuff like that. I just started to get a lot of that stuff, and then I started listening to like entrepreneurs and like people who were like leading industry. There was a podcast, it was called like the Stanford it was a class, it was a Stanford entrepreneurial conference where these heads of industry would just sit in front of like a whole auditorium of people and they would just talk about their whole life story. And I started gaining the notion that things kind of work out if you kind of follow your passion. And I
mhm.
realized that at a pretty young age, like 21. I started realizing that, and I didn't know what my passion was, but I knew I liked to just talk a lot, and I knew I liked to like just like look into things a lot. And I never knew what it was, and yeah, I kind of just got ingrained into me through like Buddhism and Alan Watts and like spiritualism that things will work out. And slowly it pushed me towards Christ, and it pushed me towards cameras, and it pushed me towards podcasts. And yeah, it was very weird, very unexpected education, just bouncing around from job to job. But yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely unlearned a lot. I don't have the same education as someone who grew up in the exact same neighborhood as me. It's like completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's goes back to what we're talking about, like being on a journey,
Yeah.
and we need people to help us sort of come alive. And I think we stifle a lot of creativity by
Yeah.
squeezing kids in this box. Like we segregate them based on age, right? So they hang out all day with people their own age.
Mhm.
Then we wonder why they hate adults, why they hate children. And it's like so they're not gleaning any insight from or wisdom from elderly people, and they
Mhm.
don't have the then they don't want to be around children, which, that can teach you a lot about life too.
Definitely.
And, like, so many of the beautiful things that you just naturally educate a person, right?
Yeah.
Spending
Yeah.
time with people who have life experience or helping somebody else.
Yeah.
We just cut the cord, and it's like we don't give kids any of that. And it's really sad. Like, look what we do with old people. We just segregate everybody based on
Yeah.
age.
True. True.
And
Very true.
just it's sad. And, like, that's
Eh,
why there's a lot of new methods, like, and I tip my hat to anybody who's trying to explore other areas or even explore homeschooling. And because, man, that can really I've met a lot of kids who are like 14, 15 years old and who have had that type of education, and man, they're smart. Like, they're
Yeah.
so smart. Like, and you just see that the world is their oyster now because they have the tools and they know how to talk with people. I say good morning to some teenagers nowadays, and they can't even look at me, and they just like, "What?" And they make fun of homeschoolers because they say, "Oh, they're not gonna become socially adapted." It's like,
Yeah.
you guys are not one to talk, right? It's like, how many times have I said good morning, right? And I'm not trying to dunk on those kids, right? Because, you know, they're in a system that's sort of training them for this. And we, as adults and educators, we need to fix this because, I mean, we're having a lot of, you know, and I hope I don't sound too dark or too depressing over it, but, like, there's just a lot of things that stifle creativity, stifle the growth of young people
Yeah.
in the current system.
Yeah, you're so right about, like, just talking to someone that's young, because like, a lot of these young people, they're starting to have jobs, and it's like
Mm,
as a server or in a grocery store, like, the way most
yeah,
people get their, like, first jobs, and they don't know how to really interact at all, at
yeah,
all. It's very interesting, and now I feel like the old guy
yeah.
'cause I'm like, "How you doing? What's been going on?" Like, trying to, like, talk to them a little bit, like, you can tell they're young and they're, like, first server job, and they just don't know how to do it. They just don't get exposed to that, and I guess what you're saying is true, because the one thing I had beyond all that weird education was I was around people that were about 13 years older than me
Yeah.
most of the time, from the time I was in high school until I was, like, 30 or, like, 28. I was always around people who were much older than me. And it taught you to converse, but it also taught you to be quiet and,
Yeah.
like, hear what they have to say and learn that. Because then when you're around people your age, you have, I don't know, I guess you just have more. You've learned more than they learned because they're around people their age the whole time. I guess that's exactly what ended up happening to me, because I was and these were, like, older guys who, like, had been to jail and stuff, and they
Mm,
have, like, all sorts of wild stories and jail stories and stuff like that, and I'm just, like, this young kid, like, hearing all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, yeah, it's definitely it you don't think of that as education, but I guess it is in a sense.
mhm.
And then what you said about older people, that's so true. We put them into these homes, and that's literally our line into, what I could even call, like, sacred knowledge,
Mhm.
Like, you don't learn about everything that they know because they just go away. Like, the only reason I knew about my wife's grandmother and her experience is because she was, I think it was Christmas time, so they had brought her from the home to where we all were for, like, a short period of time, and, like, the whole time, because 'cause I'm used to being around older people, I just wanted to listen to what she had to say. I was asking her about marriage, I was asking her about kids, I was asking her about, growing up and everything, and it's funny because, my brother-in-law, he's much younger, and he's just used to having a grandparent. I've never met any of my grandparents before, so he's just used to it. So there was, like, one point where he's, like, cutting her off, and I'm like, "Yeah, we should just listen to what she has to
Mhm.
say, because she's, like, almost 100. she probably knows like more than we do. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know her mind might be failing her at times, but I was like, let's just hear what she has to say. And I take that. Like, I even wrote it down. Like, she was
Mm,
telling us about marriage, and she was like, it's a partnership, but she wasn't saying it in like the woke way that you hear today. She was like, it's a partnership, and he would make the money, and I would make sure things were good at home. And if we had to move, I would handle everything there, and I'd make sure everything was good for him. And, I would make sure the kids were, the way they needed to be, and take care of him when he got home. But he would never make me feel like it was his money or his house. And we had this partnership where we knew our roles, and we would work together. And like, he made sure that
yeah.
she never had to work. And I was like, wow, like everything she was telling me just about growing up, and what her mother had to do, and her growing up on a farm, and running around with her twin sister, and having to do everything that you have to do on a farm. And I was like, wow, like I started like writing things down. Like, I
Mm,
was like, this is because my dad passed away in like 2016, 2017, and it's like when they're gone, they're gone. And a
yeah.
lot of people, if you don't lose anybody, you kind of don't realize that. Like, I've lost friends, I've lost my father. So I know, like, when they're gone, like, that's it. So it's like
Yeah.
hearing her talk, I'm like, if we're lucky, she's going to be around for like 6 more summers,
Mhm.
if we're lucky. So I was like, everything she was saying, I'm like, I want to hear this. Like, I
Yeah.
want to know
You
about all this. So,
write it down
yeah.
and save it for your kids, and it inspire like that type of stuff. Like everything you're describing hits home with me because I didn't get a lot of things passed down from my older. Like I met them, my grandparents, and even one of my great grandparents. But it'd be so cool to like have a relic or a family heirloom or something like that. And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking long term, like what do I want to pass down? And
Yeah.
so I created this. I made a book. I made a homemade book, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
yeah. I watched a YouTube video on how to make books, and I bound my own book.
Wow.
Yeah, let me grab it. I'll show you.
That's really cool. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you.
To bound your own book, and then to have that passed on
Yeah,
to
check this
one of your
out.
kids' grandkids would be
So I made this.
wow. Really?
Yeah,
That's
and
incredible.
it like you can see how it's like bound.
Yeah.
See, those are called signatures. It's not perfect. These are it's sturdy. This thing's gonna last like 100 years, you
Yeah.
know. But
Definitely.
I write funny family memories in it that
Wow.
I just don't want to forget. And I heard a quote like, so many parents get to know their children as adults, but so
Mhm.
few get to know them as kids or children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's preserving those memories to take them forward. Like, imagine being a grandpa and you got like 20 grandkids and you can whip this thing out.
Yeah.
And it
Wow.
it doesn't seem like you don't feel it so much now, but like to be able to think long term down the road, like I hope my kids keep this when they're adults, and like maybe they add to it, or maybe we have a volume of books, and
Yeah.
um but just something that tells a story. And I think kind of like what you were saying, being able to connect with your grandparents, and but then maybe a little piece of them sort of lives on
Yeah.
when and it makes it just come alive. And so yeah, I would encourage any fathers or parents out there to think of a family heirloom that it can start with you.
Yeah.
You can
True.
pass it down.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice there, because yeah, that's epic. That book, that can last years. There are
Yeah,
Bibles that are
pretty
bound
cool.
like that, and they're from
Yeah.
like the 1600s.
Yeah, I found the leather. I went to a thrift store and I bought
Wow.
this like leather jacket, and I put it out, and um like you can it's cool.
Wow.
It's cool. I bought like a really high
Nah,
quality paper.
that's really cool. I'm, you know what? I want to do something like that myself, because I've been thinking of how to record
Yeah.
because with my family, like I want to, me myself, I do videos and stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to actually sit down with my mom and do like an interview,
Ooh.
not something that I would post or anything, but just to have it so they can actually see her talk and see how she moved and see how she joked around or anything like that. And I want to do it with my wife's parents as well. And I would love to do it with my wife's grandmother, my daughter's great grandmother. Yeah, she's lucky enough. She has two great grandmothers, which is
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, yeah, wild.
Yeah, you could ask yourself, like, what would my what would you like to know about your great-great-grandfather now?
Yeah,
And ask that to your parents so that
yeah,
their great-grandkids, because yeah,
yeah,
they're gonna be able to be in touch with their ancestors in a way that, like, we can't even think of. Like, they're gonna all these, like, audio recordings and videos that
yeah,
exist now that, like, you probably have maybe some home video stuff. I don't know, like, my family,
yeah,
we have home videos, but, like, it's such a small little glimpse,
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
and
I would love to have some conversations on
yeah,
there, like some full scale conversations, like some like us, like we're like 2.5 hours in. Like I would
yeah,
love to do that with my mom. I've never sat down with my mom uninterrupted for 2.5 hours to just
yeah,
ask her about Barbados and immigration and what
mhm,
made you take the leap of faith to just leave an island that you knew forever. Like, like ask her about her parents because she has, I think it's like Scottish or Welsh or something. She has that in her bloodline, and she like knows the last names of like what would be like my great grandfather, and it's just weird stuff like that. I would love to just know more and
yeah,
then be able to pass that down. Just to be able to pass it down would be the best thing. Like the one thing I have that I've started is from the time my daughter was probably a week old every time because my studio's in my house. So every time my wife would come in, I'd be recording something or I would be about to record something. So I would like hit record and then bring the baby and like try and get her to talk into the microphone before she could talk.
mm,
And now like I have recordings from her not being able to do anything to now she can like grab the microphone and be like, hello, 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 hello. It's like crazy.
yeah,
So it's like
wow,
there's just dozens of those videos of just her growing in front of the camera and putting
mhm,
on the headphones and like being able to like it's wild. So I
wow,
just yeah, it's so important to have that, I think. I think it's just
mhm,
so important.
yeah,
So that book's a great idea, man. Great idea. I gotta start something like that. I
yeah,
got it. Because
definitely,
like you're talking about like passing things down. My father-in-law, he's like, oh, I gave the shoe cleaner these like shoe cleaning brushes. And I was like, "Oh," he's like, "Yeah, they belong to I think he said his great grandfather." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, he wanted them, so he came and got them." And I'm like, "Oh my god." I'm like, "They were like 120 years old?" I'm like, "I could have gave that to my son." Like, what do you like, you know what I mean? Like that would be such a crazy thing to be like, this has been in your family for
yeah,
X amount of years. Here you go. I know
yeah,
you're not going to clean shoes with them or anything, but it's like you have it. You have it. And you know that your great great grandfather held them in his hands. I
yeah,
think his great great grandfather. Like, I was like, if there's anything else, I'm like,
yeah,
please bring it to me. I'm like, I will pay you. I'm like, don't give it away.
yeah,
We were shocked, me and my wife. We were like, oh my God, are you kidding me?
mhm,
Wild, wild stuff. But yeah, you just don't think about it. A lot of people don't think about um, how important the past is.
yeah,
You know? Yeah,
yeah.
interesting stuff, man. Well, man, what's the new career path for you, man?
So, yeah, I think I mean, just talking to you, I've sort of been reignited to really pursue this podcast that
Sure.
I've started. So maybe I could talk about it if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. What do you mean?
So
Your
if
podcast?
yeah, so if people are interested, it's an interview style podcast. It's fairly eclectic, and it's called The Great Reassessment. So it's sort of a play on words from the words The Great Reset.
This,
And
right?
Yes, that's it. So
Yeah.
there's a picture of a guy pulling back the curtain, and I kind of like to think that that's what I'm doing in my podcast. I'm pulling back the curtain. It's a fairly eclectic podcast. I talk to doctors, authors, economists. I talk about Christianity and Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and I'm seeking the truth. I'm going down rabbit holes to question a lot of the conventional narratives that we've been, taught, and now people are sort of just thinking deeper about things, and so I'm having really deep conversations with people. Each episode is 45 minutes to an hour, and so that's that. I would encourage people, if they're in, if they like what we're talking about, they would probably really like my podcast.
Yeah.
So that's called The Great Reassessment. And so I'm going to really try to take the summer and keep growing that, you know.
And there it is on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube and, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, that's amazing, man.
And I'd love
Amazing.
to have you on the show, man. That'd be cool.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we can do this again, no problem. I'm full of things to talk about,
Yeah.
especially with when it comes to talking. This is your give, send, go.
Yep. And there's a picture of my family there. So if
Yeah.
people want to support me in this transition, teaching was my sole source of income. And my wife, she doesn't work. So she's a stay-at-home mom raising our 3 kids. And it's never expected, but it's certainly appreciated. And you can sort of join in on this journey with me by supporting me in this way. And so, you know, I've made a pledge to donate, I think 50% of the money to educational efforts that support free speech. And so if you donate, you can rest assured that it's also going to a really good cause. And so, yeah, we got
Mm.
that board meeting on Wednesday. And so that's going to sort of decide my fate. But, I'm trusting in the Lord that He is going to um, take care of me. Now, I've already been blown away by people's generosity during this time. And there you got so the students actually started this petition.
Yeah.
Let's see, we passed 2,500 signatures, which is really cool. So that's on change.org.
Hmm.
If people want to sign that, they certainly can. And I think that's just a really powerful statement to, the people that control my fate, that, maybe what I did wasn't so bad. And, I'm really touched that the students, started this, and, they've shown a lot of moral courage. We talked about younger generations sort of, poking fun of them a little bit, but, they've shown a lot of moral courage during this time. And so I'm so proud of my students. We didn't really talk about that much, but they're showing me that, when push comes to shove and there's something they really care about, they will, move heaven and earth, and they care about me, and I'm just proud of them. And the irony is that through this whole circumstance, I was trying to teach them about context. And it's like people are learning about context as they sort of watch this whole story unfold. And
Yeah.
they're saying, you know what? He wasn't using it in a bad way. He was reading from a book. And that's exactly what I wanted them to see. And they're getting this real life lesson unfold before their eyes. And I think it'll be something that they remember for a long time. And I hope, it's proving to be one of my best lessons. And it's a learning moment for them as well. But I'm optimistic about Gen Z, because they've they've really shown a lot of moral courage. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's amazing that they actually stepped
Yeah.
up and did that. That's they they can't look people in the eyes or anything, but at least they know when
Yeah.
something terrible is happening.
Yeah.
You know?
So, but I want
Yeah.
to thank you for having me on, man. It's been so fun to talk. And I've never done a 2-hour, 40-minute podcast before, but talking with you, it feels like it just flew by. So
Yeah, man. That's my trainer there, I learned that from Joe Rogan.
yeah.
But yeah, man, it's been amazing talking to you. And yeah, man, it sucks what's going on. And that's you said, what is it, Monday today, the
Yeah.
25th, so Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, update me. I'm gonna release this on Saturday,
Okay.
so like give me the update, and then I'll put that in the pinned comment, and I'll
Yeah.
make sure that your links are there, and I'll make sure the links are in the description and everything too, just so people can help out. But no matter what happens, honestly, I wouldn't let go of the opportunity that you have here to grow into something else. I wouldn't
Mhm.
let go of that. I think you should hold on to that and and pursue it because you know, I mean, right now, like no matter what happens, they've shown how fast they're willing to, you know, push you under the bus,
Mhm.
you know? So I always think it's better if we can grab hold of our own destiny, our own life, obviously, through God, but at least have some kind of say in what happens with us. Cause,
Yeah.
it's always just I've been like this my whole life working for myself. I mean, I worked in factories and stuff, but I always had like a side business. I always tried to, do sales. I always tried to do something. And yeah, I couldn't imagine things being any different than the way they are now. It's hard because you have to perform, but I think you can really pull off the YouTube stuff. I mean, you don't have to recreate the wheel when it comes to like making videos. Like you sat down with Winston and you see his channel, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever seen his channel before, but his YouTube channel, he sits down from like a teacher perspective and kind of just breaks down what is going on in terms of, just what's happening in the world,
Yeah.
different things. So it's like I think you could I'm saying Winston. What is his name? He's the other teacher.
Oh,
What's his name?
Warren. Warren.
Warren. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Okay. I've talked to a lot of people, and so I maybe there was a Winston, but yeah, Warren. Warren is such a cool guy, man. I
Yeah.
love Warren.
What's
We
his last name?
Warren Smith.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Smith. So I
he
completely
was
got
so
it wrong.
gracious to let me, do a conversation with me, and just a I hope to meet him in person one day. He seems like a really cool guy.
Yeah, he seems great. But it's like, you see what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you don't have to recreate the wheel. Like you can look at how he does things and you can do something similar.
Yeah.
It works. Like
Yeah.
you can do things. You can look at what Jordan Peterson does and do things there. You can reach out to Jordan Peterson. There's so many different things
Yeah.
that
There's
you could
opportunity.
do. Yeah, there's opportunity. There really is. I mean, you know, in the darkest times, that's what we're supposed
Yeah.
to be looking for is the opportunities that are there. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot there for you. So
Man. Well, I sincerely appreciate it, Coach Colin, and uh, I hope to, we'll do this again sometime, hopefully.
yeah, man. I hope one day I have a show idea where I want to travel throughout America and do do interviews, do comedy, get tattoos and stuff because I
Right.
love I love tattoos. And I hope we do this one day on a farm. That's what
Dude,
that's what I
that would
hope
be
for.
epic. That would be all the best to you, in parenting. May God bless your family and,
Yeah.
that little one you're raising, because it's whether you got one or you got 20, man, it's not easy. So
Yeah. We're going for number 2. We're working on number 2.
nice.
Yeah, we're aiming for 4. That's what we're
All right,
aiming for.
cool. That's a good number.
But what God gives you is always good.
Yeah.
But let me sign off here, but don't close your browser because it's
Okay.
like downloading and stuff. But let me just sign off here. Guys, that was Matthew. Please follow his podcast. It is here. I will make sure that is in the description. Please follow it. Please look into him, his YouTube channel, everything. It would be much appreciated. He is a free speech warrior, forced into being a free speech warrior through reading a book. But anyways, guys, I'm out. Peace.
Thanks. See ya.